And if the new drugs should go to hell before you die, please.
Wait a second, it's still going.
We're just gonna watch the Super Mario Brothers Super Show today. The Mattriarchy.
Paisanos.
Curses! My beautiful intro ruined by some guy in a. I don't think he was a wig. I think he had Jerry curl in there or something.
No, it's
Anyway,
Captain Lou.
beautiful intro ruined by some guy. Wait a second.
Echo.
Who's got their speaker on?
I've got headphones.
Yeah, I'm on headphones.
Okay, I heard myself repeated here. And
I
that was
hurt
awkward.
myself today.
You're going crazy.
Maybe it's Thursday.
I heard the echo
No,
too. So
Going? He's always crazy.
It's Wednesday. It's
my
Wednesday.
dudes.
I said it was Thursday. Yeah, this thing hasn't been Thursday for a year and a half. Something I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's Wednesday. It's the Mattriarchy. We're getting viewers just dropping like flies. But we are here to talk about my favorite, a video game comic, which was not what we were going to talk about this week. We had a different plan in place. This was going to be an October show, but it got bumped up because we had some the stuff in the background going on, and that's just kind of what it is. But when I agreed to this was Cartoonicus's idea, and I thought, hey, that sounds clever. But I realized I don't know that I thought thinking about it, I'm not sure I've read a video game comic book. I know they exist. I don't know that I've read one, except I did read Batman Fortnite, which is not my pick. So there you go. But yeah, so hey guys, how's it going?
Howdy, howdy.
Hey, howdy, hey.
Worst introduction ever.
How are you doing?
Yeah,
Stay tuned.
I'm doing okay. No, I was saying mine was, by the way. I wasn't trying to scold anybody who said hello just there. But so Cartoonicus, this was your idea. Why?
I like video games, and I think it was after, very shortly after the Sonic movie 2 actually had come out, and it was just got me thinking about the comics and stuff, and suddenly I was like, hey, wait a minute. So I pitched it to Logan, and then he said I asked him if he would pitch it to you, and then he said I should pitch it to you. So I pitched it to you, and then I think he ended up pitching it to you anyway.
Yes.
And somehow by the time we got back around, I think 3 streams ago, I had apparently, or was being credited with bugging you repeatedly.
Well, look, okay.
And I don't think I ever mentioned it more than once.
Well, no, I'm really? Well, then I guess maybe I was unfair, and I owe you an apology.
Hey, I'm just glad it happened.
I thought you'd mention it at least twice.
I'll tell you what, I have certainly been wanting to do this ever since I mentioned it.
So,
and I've practically been preparing for it ever since I mentioned it.
Oh wow, then you should go first because I feel less prepared.
Oh sure, no pressure.
Animal Crossing. There you go. Abigail in the chat says Animal Crossing ?
Yeah, so
yes.
Captain N is doing some black magic today.
Yeah, this is amazing.
Yeah. And I do want to go ahead and take the time here to point out we have Abigail in the chat, Ray Cortex is here, Dave Ashanovich is here. So guys, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it. We are going to be talking about Carmen's Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego #1, a selection of Archie Sonic comics, Captain N the Game Master #1, the Nintendo Power Super Mario Adventures trade paperback, and some City of Heroes books, which, man, that's interesting. We'll have to get to that. So,
Yeah, I just figured, Captain N, he's basically in an isekai, right? He gets pulled into another world, and if he's in a video game world, I might as well have him from inside a video game.
There we go.
Though,
Yeah.
Also, where's the settings here? If you want, I could always just turn that off and
You can't really have a
come here from
conversation.
here as well.
Oh my god.
Oh my gosh!
Someone's a fan of Captain N. You can't really have a conversation about video game comics and video game crossover type material like that without talking about, at least mentioning, Captain N. So I'm glad he's being if you hadn't picked him, Metal, I would have probably, just because he needs to be on the panel, have picked a Captain N book.
I might or might not be in the running for biggest Captain N fan.
Well, so here's my question. Is Captain N the comic based on the cartoon or vice versa?
The cartoon came first.
Cartoon, yeah.
Okay,
And actually,
so this is
I have
a comic
based
off a cartoon.
Yes,
based off
I
a video game.
actually have some lore though, because
Are we starting with Captain N? Is that
might
what
as
we're
well.
doing?
I think
so,
Captain N
yeah.
has taken over. So I'll set the stage with a little bit of lore before Metal can gush and fanboy out on us. But what's really interesting is the fact that these comics were, and I mean no disrespect to the comics themselves, because like I said, I think the comics are actually pretty good, but they're actually the result of, at least according to Jim Shooter. If everyone remembers, Jim Shooter was was editor-in-chief at Marvel for a time. He was kind of a wonder kid for a bit. He broke into comics by like sending scripts in and getting basically recognized as, hey, you can write Legion of Superheroes. And suddenly he was, off to the races. He's like almost 7 feet tall. He's this huge guy. And he set the tone for a lot of Marvel for a time. He's responsible for things like the first Secret War, one of the big major crossovers for Marvel. And he's also did some things behind the scenes, like helping to get royalties for Marvel creators. So all of that to say, he got ousted. People did not like him.
He made apparently work on time.
He was apparently difficult to work with on some levels, and there's different stories on that. But he went and started another comic book. He raised capital, started another comic book company with Voyager Communications or something, and it was called Valiant Comics. And that's what's one of the main, one of the big indie companies. Here's where things get interesting and actually tie into Captain N. The people that Jim Shooter was working with were actually pretty dirty, like some real shady crap. Two of them, I think, were of the partners he was working with were sleeping with each other, and so they had clear conflict of interest, and they could kind of just override anyone else, and they ended up wresting control of the company away from Shooter. After that happened, one of the partners was a lawyer for Nintendo. And so because he was a lawyer for Nintendo, he decided, with his power and clout on the company, he decided to basically say, we're going to do Nintendo comics. And Jim Shooter was like, well, I made this to do my interconnected Valiant universe with Magnus Robot Fighter and Turok and Exo Man of War and Harbinger and stuff. And no, you're going to do Nintendo comics with Mario and Zelda and Captain N. And so Jim Shooter has an interesting a perspective on this whole thing. And apparently the lawyer guy, because he was the lawyer for Nintendo, but then he also made money whenever these comics were made. He made like a bucket load of cash, and it was really, really shady stuff. But it did lead to probably what I would say, I think, the best piece of Captain N media, which is in fact the comic book series. Very short-lived, but pretty interesting stuff. And I'll pull some images, and Captain N, if you want to start gushing and set us up with...
I told you guys, this guy does more homework than the rest of us combined.
This is true.
I used to read Jim Shooter's blog, so some of this is stuff I already knew. There's also they didn't just do comics for Nintendo. There's actually a CD, a music CD that they illustrated, and it has to do with King Koopa digging up oil and hurting Yoshis, and it led to this cartoon that was on the internet for a bit. The Ignorance is Bliss. Anyone watch that during the good old Newgrounds days?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was Valiant as well. So all that stems from this and leads to Captain N. But let's not waste any more time. Captain N, take it away. Tell us why Captain N is awesome.
The history of Captain N goes even further back than that. That obviously that's how we got into the comic.
Sure.
But the character actually started in Nintendo Power with a very, very short, almost like a pulp, where there were like a couple comic panels but it was words in between, right? And it was kind of a proposal as a like a mascot that wasn't Mario, like a unrelated to an individual game for Nintendo from the actual director of Nintendo Power at the time. And they shut it down. They're like, we don't need a mascot. We've got Mario, right? But it kind of became like a loved character at Nintendo Power, and they kept trying to force him into different things. And eventually they were able to convince him to use this character for one of the Deke cartoons that they had contract, which they had done several. People don't understand that the Deke cartoons are probably some of the most influential pieces of media when it comes to Nintendo characters.
Yeah, so hit us with some of the major Deke, because some people, who are not as familiar, Deke has made a lot of animation. They also did the
like
Sonic,
Inspector Gadget and stuff like that.
The Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon series. Like they did a lot of stuff.
Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? Or where on Earth is Carmen Sandiego is the one they did.
Didn't they do Mummies Alive or whatever too?
Yes, they did.
Yeah. There's just a whole slew of Deke cartoons.
And one of the reasons they're so influential is because a lot of these characters didn't have personalities before these cartoons. Like even the modern personalities for Mario and Luigi, you can trace back to the Deke cartoon, which then gets picked up in the Valiant comics or the first comics. They handle the characters, but they even somewhat preserve those personalities when they do the Super Mario World related comic that we'll talk about later on. And these shows kind of like set the standard for what these characters would evolve into, even if they were altered some. Like specifically Luigi's Scaredy Cat personality originated back in the Super Show. And Captain N was really, really weird because, like I said before, he was basically isekai'd into this place called Video Land. He was playing video games one day. He was in the middle of playing Punch-Out when the ultimate warp zone opens up and drags him into Video Land, and him and his dog Duke. And they need,
and that's a live action scene. That's a live action scene.
Yeah,
and then he gets sucked into the cartoon world. Yeah.
It's at the beginning of every single episode for the intro. And train of thought. Oh yeah. So he basically, they needed a champion, somebody who is really, really good at video games.
The Palace of Power is under, like basically taking straight from Masters of the Universe. The Palace of Power is under attack.
Yeah.
And there was a routine trope in 80s cartoons. It goes, I mean, even in The Last Starfighter, all that kind of stuff.
Well, that's actually the funny thing is, so Captain N, admittedly, is a horrible adaptation of basically every single video game involved with it. End of story. You cannot think of a good example of a video game that was adapted into Captain N, with maybe Bayou Billy wasn't horribly slaughtered.
The comic, because I will actually say I think this is probably one of the best versions of Samus Aran we've ever gotten.
Yeah, I like
possibly. Though it does deviate from where they took her character. At the time, you can't really argue that they had as much to go off of.
What I want to know is, was Mario ever in there? Because I have never seen it.
No, the Super Mario show was often, I think, was in the same like a partnered time block. So
it was like a Power Hour type thing.
Right. Yeah. So you'd see an episode of Super Mario, and it would have.
Zelda was the bonus cartoon after Mario Brothers. So this was sort of like Nintendo's not the things that are not Nintendo's top two properties were in Captain.
Zelda would air
actually
on Friday after the rerun of Mario Brothers, so it wouldn't air on the same day that the new episode came.
Zelda actually does cross over into Captain N, the cartoon, but
it's
Mario
the best depiction of Zelda.
Mario does not cross over into the Captain N cartoon. However, if you want to be sneaky about it, Mario's sound effects sneak themselves into the cartoon. So Mario's impact thumbprints are still on it.
Interesting.
Yeah. But like the bigger thing was that even though it kind of slaughtered every interpretation of video games that was in it, it was more of a kind of trope farm. So what it did do right is it pulled in basically every major trope that you would see in like earlier like comic pulps and stuff like that, all the way into the 80s, because this came out in 89, so it had basically the whole 80s before it to feed off of. Captain N himself is basically just a parody of Flash Gordon, just thrown into a video game world. Like just
I can
straight
see
up,
that,
that's what he is.
Yeah.
The N on his shirt doesn't even stand for Nintendo. It stands for Northridge High because it's his varsity jacket. He's a swimmer on their team, like on the varsity team. You even meet some of his classmates later as they get temporarily pulled into the game.
So that's the cartoon. The cartoon
and then
also
this follows up after that.
Right. The cartoon is also interesting because the cartoon was able to tap into not just the official Nintendo IPs, but also tap into Capcom and Konami because the cast of characters for the cartoon included Captain N, but also included Mega Man, which is from Capcom,
Right.
Simon Belmont, which is a horrific rendition.
He
like
puts
an
the
aviator
vein in
jacket.
Castlevania.
Oh my gosh, he's terrible. So Simon Belmont and
Twitless, how many episodes did you watch in preparation for this show?
I watched enough. Is all I'm gonna say.
I've seen every episode.
So I'm not. Yeah, nowhere near as Captain N, but I did get enough to get anyway. So and then what was I gonna say? As opposed to being called Pit, they just call him Kid Icarus.
Kid Icarus, and
Now,
he's from
part of
Mount
this-
Icarus in the cartoon. They give it a better name. They just call it Mount Olympus in the comics. Which is...
So part of what's going on here is the fact, and the reason why Samus Aran does not show up in the, and this will help us transition to start talking about the comic, right? So the head writer for the Captain N television show, it admitted, I don't really play video games. And so when someone asked him, hey, why is Metroid in this show? And but Samus Aran isn't, he's like, well, I never heard of her. So like he was that level of boomerific. I don't know what video games are. So we're lucky, the show is probably lucky enough that it had as many references anywhere near on the dartboard.
Especially, so there was a bigger problem on top of that too, with different interviews from different people worked on the show. They were not given copies of any of the games at all to like work off of. They were given some instruction manuals, and basically everything else they had to go off of were from gaming magazines like Nintendo Power. And like the showrunner, he didn't even read it, but like the other people working on it, they just had to skim information.
I'll buy that for like 5 seconds, except for the fact that you could literally, if you're in Hollywood, go and talk to your 8-year-old nephew and go, "Hey, what's the deal with this Metroid?"
Hollywood,
little Timmy.
Hollywood.
And you could literally, little Timmy,
Hollywood.
Timmy could just be like, well, it's actually a girl at the end. So like, no excuses.
You're forgetting for a second there, Twitless, that half of Deke and all of its execs, or most of its execs, were based in France.
Okay, you could still get little Francois to go and pick up his was it PAL? Is that the version they would get?
It's not Denmark. They didn't have the Nintendos like they had other places.
Oh yeah, actually, most of the games didn't even make it to Europe. Like Europe was starved for video games during like the Nintendo era, and that's why they were heavily leaning on Sega, and then later PlayStation became. I'm
fairly certain the head writer for Captain N was an American. I think he's a Hollywood insider, so I'm going off of him.
At the time, he would have been Toronto.
All right. Okay, so he could definitely get a copy. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not.
If I may point out, this is probably not uncommon.
There are some understandable parts about the convoluted mess of not just Captain N, but all of the Nintendo properties that were run through Deke. And part of that also is because Deke is a mess.
All right, well, let's dive into the comic here. On the first page, there's actually.
Before we get into that, I got a couple of jokes from the chat that I really got to point out.
Oh yeah. Here's the chat.
Abigail says, "Enough, Captain N." Oh no. So that was one thing I had to point out.
One episode is enough, by the way.
Hiroshi Paradox says he liked Simon, even though Simon was horrible. So that was fun. It's a poor adaptation by.
There's a certain charm to him. He's not Simon. If you gave him like literally any other name, there's a certain charm to the character.
He has a whip.
Dave asks, was Kid Video first? And I'm not familiar with Kid Video.
I'm not either.
I think Kid Vid's older.
Yeah.
I want to say he was like 85.
Was that Kid Vid from the Burger King Kids Club Kid Vid? It was a different one.
I want to say it was 85. Yeah, I think this is Kid Video. Yeah.
So, anyway.
So diving into the comic here. So there's actually several recognizable video game properties on here, but they're so adapted so poorly that they're practically unrecognizable. We have Mother Brain, who's been portrayed in the most fascinatingly ugly, ridiculous Tumblr. It's funny. It's
I
so
seriously could not believe that was Mother
the
Brain.
Mother Brain is so out of tune that it actually fits modern sensibilities. When you look at the makeup that they put on Mother Brain, it's like I see people with makeup like that now.
Well, she's the beautiful queen of Videoland.
Well, Blue Eyeshadow. Come on, Twitless. Maybe you just aren't old enough, but I'm telling you, Blue Eyeshadow was everywhere in the 80s.
No, I'm just saying that it's so ridiculous that, but especially the lips. It reminds me of that video that's been making the rounds of the guy who's wearing that prosthetic and teaching shop class. That's basically what we've got here on the.
Because her being ugly is played off of a joke because she always calls herself beautiful.
Oh yeah, that's actually really smart. Okay, it's not ridiculous. All right, so
Twitless takes it back. He's questioning all
my assumptions. All right, so the thing I do have to point out is that the guy in the top right quadrant of that second panel on the first page, that's supposed to be Donkey Kong wearing the shower cap, or is that like a?
It's gotta be.
No, it is Donkey Kong. I'm just trying to. I don't think it's a shower cap. That's like the Berenstein Bear Moz cap kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
that's still a shower cap.
It's a shower cap. He even in the show he was seen showering a couple times.
Oh, that's right. He's in the bath when they. Okay, so then we have Eggplant Wizard. I think was the only one who escapes practically unscathed and actually looks kind of like what he should. King Hippo is blue because why not?
Because he's cold. Ray Cortex.
Yeah. Okay.
And also, Abigail says, "Why did you have to remind me of him?"
Because Mother Brain this is exactly what Mother Brain reminds me of, in terms of the aesthetic here.
It was only 30 years ago.
And then this Uranus
thing that happened last week.
There's a theme in
Uranus is a very clever way of avoiding saying Uranus in a kid's comic. I got to give him props for that.
Uranus.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So and then the angel kid over there, that's supposed to be Pit from Kid Icarus, but they just call him Kid Icarus, which is actually not the worst thing they could have done.
It's still better that they changed his homeland to Mount Olympus instead of Mount Icarus, like in the TV show.
Yeah, so the comic is written with a more serious tone, although there's still a lot of there's like a panel in this particular first story here.
That is one thing I love about.
But they play the material more straight, and that's something that Valiant was kind of known for doing. They played a lot of their writing much more straight. And they're able to get some interesting pathos out of some of these stories. This one is George Carragon, Bob Layton, Ken Lopez. So I think that's the story people, and then art was. I'm trying to turn my head sideways because they did the credits really weird.
Art Nichols, John Caballero. That's a weird way of crediting it too. Here's the people. They did stuff. You figure it out.
It's like a golden age comics again, or just credits. Who needs credits? Okay, so walk us through the first adventure we get in the Valiant comic here.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why the first one particularly is my favorite of these is because it's just like a mash of shorts. They are all supposed to follow in chronological order. There's supposed to be like a temporal through line to everything in these, but they're not like directly connected, even thematically. It's just like a whole bunch of shorts. And the first one that we get is the Fruit and Vegetable War. So, Kev, for people know Captain N's real name is Kevin Keene. A lot of times they just call him Kev. Kid Icarus here will sometimes refer to him as Captain N because it's his hero. So he kind of gives him like a level of respect in that way. But they're flying around. They're kind of like on patrol. Kev is getting used to these kind of like mechanical actual reference to the Icarus myth wings as they're doing it. And when they're flying over, they're attacked by these pterodactyls, which are the first good pun that comes out of this. I love the pterodactyls and the whole idea behind them. But they're basically flying over this like cornucopia kingdom that's full of fruits and vegetables of different sorts, who have kind of like separated themselves into tribes for based on whether a fruit or vegetable, for no good reason. But we'll find out that there's somebody stoking this war between them later.
Well, and also they're not entirely accurate about stuff.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean like when the
So
the
like
pumpkin being a gourd, and we're not going to address
so
that.
pumpkins are
okay.
gourds, and there are vegetables, but they're fruits by the same definition that tomatoes are, and
Are we
tomatoes
going to get in the same war that they were in?
Right. The important thing to point out is the fact that there is a pun in every single one of these panels, I believe.
Yes, I love it.
So
Probably.
it's pretty crazy. And of course, Cartoonicus would be absolutely in love with that because he's in love with puns.
Yeah, who doesn't love puns?
Within moderation. All right, so Captain.
So at least they get it out of their system in this first story,
that's
and you're
fair.
just not like overloaded with puns for the rest of the comic.
That's fair. All right, so there's a war over basically which camp the tomatoes should be in. We got some pretty insane caricatures going on. We've got the conquistador over here. We got some Roman, there's Native American. Is that a Native American cherry or an apple? I think it's an apple. So it's this.
And we've got Attila the Hun Edu.
Yeah,
such a great character.
Good gosh.
Tomato Town was the worst hit. Paste everywhere.
So we find out that
props, by the way, to the debate over whether tomatoes are a fruit or a vegetable being used as a plot point for a war.
Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't even realize it was that old a debate.
Well, yeah.
Mhm.
They're the fruit of the plant. That's the thing.
All right.
So
So
biologically, they're a fruit.
Oh yeah, I know that.
the real villain here is, of course, our eggplant wizard, who, like I said, is pretty much, I think, comes the most unscathed in terms of being portrayed correctly.
I think it's also the theme of like why they chose to do this. You're like, okay, one of the villains we have to work with is an eggplant.
Right.
What kind of story are we going to tell first? So they do this whole like fruit and vegetable thing.
Right.
Yeah. Now, that being said, what's I find very interesting about the Valiant take on the Captain N storytelling is it's very surprising the things they do still get wrong. I think some of that's carryovers from the television show.
Yeah, there's like some things they can't actually change if they're going to be telling stories with the same characters. So it's almost like they're trying to like squeeze by like, what can we fix? What can't we?
But there are some details that they clearly know well, and so it's weird. You get this weird mix of like them being on point with the Nintendo lore in some places, then in other places being way off. It's an interesting mix. Whereas the show was just like completely off. The comic ends up hitting close in some very interesting areas.
Now, does anyone else feel like Kid Icarus has the potential to be way more powerful than he's actually portrayed in these comics, almost to a scary level? But he can
You can say that about a lot of characters.
So the thing is that the way they chose to interpret him in the show is just, he's like he's a Cupid. So they just kind of like lean into that.
Yeah, when you realize that he can hit you with one of these arrows and just completely change your outlook on life. It's like, whoo!
Well, in this comic, he makes a guy itch. So
yeah.
And I actually found it. I'm only familiar with Pitt from my kids playing Smash Brothers. So,
he has a great design in that.
Yeah. Okay, so we need before we because we are so much to get to, but before we do need to talk about the breakout hit that is Samus Aran, because she is reading this. The Valiant portrayal of Samus is probably one of the best portrayals of Samus I have seen.
Yeah, not even in this one. I believe it is. I think it was issue 4. The one where she and Lana were in the prison together, I think, is probably one of the best depictions of Samus out of the whole thing.
I like the one where they go back. There's the time warp one where Captain
N, the trash
that's
kingdom,
another, that's because she like sacrifices her a potential like it's they give her.
Yeah.
So basically, this version of Samus Aran is very much a bounty hunter, and they really lean into even in the video games, they're not always good at leaning into the bounty hunting aspect of her character.
She effectively just works for the Federation as a freelancer.
Yeah, she just works for the government. But in this comic, they really lean into the fact that, well, I'm a bounty hunter, so I'm interested in money, and I'm interested in I live a hard life, and so things I want, I go after them, and I go after them fast. And it's like, you know what? That fits. Like what I think, and so she's able to be tough, but when she sees Captain N, she kind of like takes a liking to him, and so she instantly, because so they're able to make a very quick kind of romance angle on it and have it fit her character because of that sort of like very straightforward. I see what I want and I take it, and so
wait a second. Captain N's like 17 though, right?
This is before Tumblr though, so it's cool.
If you take into account when the games were made, though, Samus is like what, 4?
I think you're doing like leap year counting there.
Anyway, it's space rules. It's fine.
I wanted to add one thing about Samus's bounty hunter. So what's kind of neat about that is this is still like an infancy period for a lot of these characters. So they're attaching to basically one key detail they know about the character, and then on that key detail, it's sort of like the archetype personality pops into your head. So what struck me is I knew Samus was a bounty hunter, but you're right. They don't lean into it. So if you forget everything you know about Nintendo characters and you think Samus is a bounty hunter, then suddenly the archetype that springs into your mind is someone who's greedy for money and someone who's very daring and lives on the edge. So I kind of love how.
Yeah, this is a great portrayal of her, and there are people who like complain about sometimes where they've taken her character in the video games, like Metroid Other M. People put them on blast. They're like, you've just, this is awful. This version I would take. This is a good take on Samus.
The reason I like this because she's not just like somebody who's like grimy bounty hunter on the edge. She plays with there's two like real societal pathos that there are, right? There's virtue and there's honor, and these two things are not always, but sometimes at odds with each other. And Samus is definitely a character who has an honor system that she follows, that drives her for what she is. She doesn't really care so much about the virtue, but she does care about the honor of it. And that's what we even see later, why she decides to give up Kevin's possible future with her and go back in time. And then she tells Lana afterwards, I want to win him fair and square. And there's kind of like this part of her like internal code of honor that drives the way she acts. They even go back and it gives her a surprising amount of depth while also preserving her as being a very strong character which is consistent with her video game personality. Well, even like this character itself is very consistent in a way that you really couldn't say that the cartoon characters were consistent, right? So like you see her honor a code play in this one near the end of it, where she does leave with Kevin with on the insistence of Lana, but then they knock out the guards, take their uniforms, and they're the ones in the ship at the end, right? But then you see that play back in when she respects Kevin, but she sees him as an honorable person. She wants to kind of like court him. So when he tells her to look after Lana, even though she could have just left, to follow her like honor code, she has to go and get Lana out of the prison and follow through on the thing that she promised. So you see this like really, really consistent like internal logic to the character.
The artwork for her is also pretty well done. It's a little clunkier than more of her modern incarnations, but it's definitely Samus. I didn't feel like it was disrespectful, and it gives her an armored weight, which is kind of cool. She's a real powerhouse. There's even it just occurred to me, a surprising bit of lore consistency. When she runs out of energy, she says, I'm about to like explode. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's just comic book. And then I was like, wait a second. In the video game, whenever you die in the first Metroid, you kind of technically, it looks like you explode. So someone actually did play the games here. So even though there is that lore inconsistency with them talking about the planet as Metroid as opposed to Planet Zebes, which is what it should be, but I think that's a carryover from the cartoon, because in the cartoon they just called the planet Metroid. So I think they're having to kind of balance the being consistent.
I caught the word. I caught the word Zebes somewhere.
Zebes was in there. So
not as a planet. They called it
Zebetite
or something.
Right. So the way Captain N treats it is that there are zones, right? The warp zones. Sure. There's different zones to Videoland. So even in the cartoon, as horrible as they call Kid Icarus's home, Mount Icarus, it wasn't the only place in his zone, right? That was like the capital of it. So all the different video games basically had their own zone that you had to go to. And Metroid was the overall name of the zone.
Hey, at least they didn't call her Metroid.
I just wish they'd actually put actual Metroids in here, but you know.
Yeah, I do too.
Oh well, can't have everything. This is also part to mention that I actually think that Captain N as a character, how his actual superpower, even though it was made to be the cheesiest dumb thing ever, it's actually really cool. He has the Nintendo Zapper, so he's got like a cool little gun. But he has this belt, which is it's basically a gamepad from the NES, and he pushes buttons on it. He actually gets little superpowers that are he can
like
do.
Entering a cheat code almost.
So he can make himself jump higher. He can pause things, like kind of freeze time a little bit temporarily. So it's actually kind of legit in terms of a superhero story.
And he literally has knowledge of the game world. His real life experience, playing video games. Sure. Take that, mom and dad. I can get a real career doing this.
Yeah. So any last thoughts before we move on to the next one?
I love. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The first video game character dying and reincarnating in a video game world anime 30 years before every anime became about that.
Well, I don't think he died.
He got like literally sucked in the same way that like Mario and Luigi go down pipes.
Or a Freakazoid got sucked into the internet.
Yeah.
Unless there's a darker interpretation to that,
no.
that scene I was supposed to take. Was he getting electrocuted by the TV? Was he actually dying?
Later on in the show, they even kind of explain this, that it's almost like Videoland does and doesn't exist. It's a Wonderland type situation. It exists for the people in the games, and it exists for you while you're there. But with the episode where his classmates, which are other people on varsity teams and stuff like that, it was a beach episode. They were surfing, and it actually is the one time that his swimming comes into the play, as somebody asked earlier. What happens is when he gets them to go back, Lana explains that they won't remember anything from the time that they were here in Videoland. And that even implies that if Kev ever leaves and goes back home, if he ever succeeds his mission, he won't remember anything that happened there either. It'll all just be like a dream.
Okay. I joked about this behind the stream, but I'm ready to fight on something. So I never liked Captain N much as a kid. And the thing that bugged me as a kid is I kind of instantly sensed like I do like weird cartoons, but what kind of weirded me out is, well, it's a whole cartoon about a guy who plays video games. And even as kind of a kid, I thought, well, that sounds lame. So, and it kind of bugs me today, even because he doesn't quite feel like he fits. I guess we have this really weird, bizarre cartoon universe. None of the characters are quite a good adaptation of the original cartoons. And he feels like a Mary Sue to me, because it's sort of like the whole universe is set up to make Captain N feel like a great hero. So sell me on Captain N himself. Do you like him
so
he's
I kind of agree with your problem to a bit. Mostly because as a character, right? If he was somebody who lived in this world, he would be a very good like Flash Gordon, maybe Indiana Jones type character. But he doesn't actually reflect the type of person who plays games all day. And it's because they wanted a Flash Gordon type character who could actually roll around, throw some punches and stuff like that. So you needed an athlete who was on varsity. But especially back in the earlier days of video games, before it was like the major form of entertainment that most people engage with these days, you wouldn't have seen the person who spends most of his time practicing after school at home playing like a Nintendo for hours and hours and hours on end. So like that kind of what's it called? Disassociation is a very understandable one to have.
So before we jump into the next one, I think I'll definitely say that for me, the cartoon is unwatchable. It literally confirms all of Marm's prejudices, in my opinion. That being said, the Valiant comic, because the Valiant team were very earnest in what they did, the projects that they took, Jim Shooter's, commitment to really just kind of being very respectful of his readers' intelligence.
Yeah.
That when you apply it to something, even as campy as Captain N, results in some surprisingly nuanced storytelling at times. So I don't want to oversell this comic, but at the same time, for as ridiculous as this premise is, and as almost I wouldn't say disingenuous, but it was almost as slimy as some of it seems at times. Like just the idea of just like this, we're just going to put video game stuff together. The kids will love it, with almost like no attention to the lore. So the Valiant
thing too, right?
It's just the Valiant approach to it. I think has a very genuine spirit to it, and they definitely put a lot of effort. Like there's an issue where they took the time to diagram out Samus's ship. Like they put time into this, and
I love all the little
So they did not just
drawings and stuff they put in between.
They didn't just phone it in, and so and you can look up this archive of this comic online and so on. But Valiant earned the reputation and deserves it, and so I think that Valiant Captain N comics get a thumbs up from me. The show, not so much.
I hated the show. This was actually a really enjoyable comic. So it was good. My rule is always, if a comic's good, I keep reading it. So this was a very strong first issue, and enough to convince me to read more of this. I was also struck by the quality of the art throughout. Like really nice. It reminded me a little of like Mobius. Really well thought out locales. Not ridiculously over detailed, but it feels reasonably fleshed out. Like the Metroid world feels like a pretty good sci-fi world. It has that feel to it. So impressive.
I like what Hiroshi Paradox here says, that look at any Nintendo ad from the 80s. It's always some cool 80s kid with a cool 80s room playing NES.
Yep. Yeah. And the art is nice as well. We do need to keep things moving. So who wants to go? Since we're on the Nintendo thing, we might as well jump into Super Mario Adventures.
All right.
That makes sense, right?
Since we were missing Mario in this,
I'll pull some references. So Marm, do you want to walk us through some of?
Sure. I own the physical edition, but I was able to pull up a.
I have images. If you just want to tell me where you want to go. Yeah.
All right. Well, boy, I've read a lot of video game comics. I kind of picked this one off the top of my head, but I'll stick with it. I think what I love specifically about the Super Mario Adventures comic is it's a great example of a comic that knows precisely what its target audience is. Like Captain N, this comic isn't related to the Super Mario Brothers Super Show at all, but it's kind of the same era. It was published in Nintendo Power over, like one chapter per issue over a series of issues. And I think Captain N himself mentioned this earlier, but early history of the Mario Brothers, what are their personalities? I guess he's kind of like Popeye, right? There were some Japanese OVAs I'm aware from. And what's weird about them is if you ever go back and watch any of them, you can tell they're trying to come up with personalities for Mario and Luigi, but they're completely different to what you're used to. So in Japan at some point, I think the Mario's stock personality was that he was a coward, and Luigi's stock personality was that he was a money grubber who was obsessed with collecting coins, right? So in the Super Mario Brothers Adventures comic, I think we start to consistently get a pattern to these characters' personalities. And one thing that's noticeable is they're not nice, clean-cut mascots like Mickey Mouse. I think Mario has developed into a very clean-cut mascot character for Nintendo, but they do some naughty humor. They get bit on the butt a lot. There are some slightly risque gags in this comic, and we see Mario as kind of a hyper confident, sort of a jerk, but he's a hero who's a jerk, and the fact that he's a jerk doesn't make him unlikable.
I love the angle they took to make him such a jerk that Wario is actually justified in hating him, which is a very interesting angle on that relationship.
Yeah. Well, so he's the classic stereotype of the jerk with the heart of gold, which you see very, very common, especially in manga, but
Sonic.
everywhere. Ranma and Ranma and a Half is also the jerk with the heart of gold type personality.
Well, and I mean, with relation to the Wario story that is the back of it, I don't think it's necessarily so much that he's a jerk. It's just like he thinks everything's a laugh. Has no concept of how serious Wario has taken the insult.
He doesn't see how his behavior is interpreted by other people.
I would even argue Popeye is the same archetype.
As a Bowser stan, Mario's a jerk.
Getting back to Popeye. So one of the striking things about Popeye is he's a blue collar dude. He's a sailor, right? Who's very strong in fights on behalf of Olive Oil. The Popeye artistic influence is completely obvious if you look at the old art for the arcades. It's basically Popeye with a mustache on. This comic, I think, nails the blue collar aspect of Popeye. Like you literally see them working Popeye, on pipes. Sorry.
He was supposed to be Popeye, wasn't he? I mean,
they literally took a Popeye machine and turned it into Donkey Kong because it wasn't selling and they needed something.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
The other kind of really interesting twisteroo, and this gets developed more in later chapters, but Peach as a tomboy. And I don't know, flashback to Gamergate. Gamergate, one of the things that kicked off Gamergate was feminists complaining about Princess Peach being a sexist damsel in distress. So Mario Brothers is sexist, therefore all video games are sexist. And one of the problems with that is, Princess Peach being kidnapped is a running gag. It's a lampoon of the old melodrama damsel in distress heroine. And at the same time, there frequently throughout her life, Princess Peach has not been a damsel in distress. And this comic actually completely, by turning it on its head, makes a delightful joke out of that.
They make her... I'm wondering, I'm not as big on the manga of the time, contemporary, but like they were channeling some serious like action girl manga vibes for her. She's like a warrior princess in this, at least in attitude.
Well, this also comes from the Super Show because it's very similar to what Princess Toadstool's personality was in there. She was constantly getting captured, but she was running around with them, fighting Bowser and his minions all the same.
I would say that this actually levels up on that because I've seen some of the Super
takes
Show.
It further.
Yeah, this one, she actually, by herself, chases Bowser across a desert. Like, this is a level of, like, strong female heroine it's really interesting. And Mario and Luigi still get a chance to shine, but they're almost comically inept for the first chunk of this story.
Yeah. Well, I would argue that's the same for everything in here, is that they take aspects from the Super Show that kind of establish things, and they just went further, right? And they turned it into their own thing that was completely separated from it. But I think the cooler thing is that they did something in here that the Super Show never did. And they actually properly explained video game mechanics in story elements.
I like
the
that.
coolest thing is the cape later on.
Right. So in the video, for people who don't know, in the video game, you can use a cape in certain levels as a floating power. What's clever about it in this comic is if you didn't play the video game, it would make sense. So there's basically a scene where she falls out of the tower, that she accidentally sort of trips over a curtain or grabs a blanket or something and accidentally turns it into a parachute. Oh. So the physics kind of makes sense in the universe in this comic. Right. And it's not treated as, oh, well, this is a video game power-up. We're video game characters, so we can just conveniently grab whatever we need.
Here's one of the scenes where she's like going full on like action heroine ham. Yeah. And I will say I do appreciate what Marm is saying, that and that's actually something I'm glad you brought up, because some of these video game comics do better jobs than others at integrating the video game-ness elements. This Mario comic, I think, does a pretty solid job. Captain N is pretty bad at that, I would say, even though it's lovable.
No, I would agree with that, yeah.
So
and one of the things that I think this was both captures. I mean, like, there's that scene where Mario and Luigi end up in this lava pit, and they've got to like bounce from rock to rock. And I mean, it's a straight platformer scene, and it fits in really well. But at the same time, like, you look at the sequential art, like the actual comics of this comic, and for being an adaptation, like, this is like pure sequential art storytelling. They're doing stuff with interacting with sound effects. I mean, like, there's a scene at the beginning of it where when
Nizawa is I was gonna say the illustrator is Nizawa. He's very talented.
Man, it's so good. But so there's a scene in the beginning where Koopa shows up to make his proposal to Princess Peach, and because this is all an evil dastardly attempt to get a wife.
Yep.
Anyway, and
poor guy just wants a mom for his kids.
Just wants a mom for his kids, which begs the question of what happened to their birth mom. But that doesn't matter.
It's Bowser. Miyamoto, it's confirmed he's the father.
Okay, I thought you were saying Bowser was the father and the mother first.
No, they can lay eggs like the Yoshis.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, well, that's weird.
Yeah.
Oh, whatever. It's a magical land. So, where he has a magic wand, he starts just turning toads, the mushroom people, into stone, and there are sound effects that are getting turned into stone that are laid around, and it's just perfect comics.
I want to segue into that. So humor in this comic is a consistent element, and they do several types of humor. They do haha, he got bit on the butt gags, that 6-year-olds are going to love it. They do puns, they do absurdity, like characters breaking into rap, and they do comedic irony. So one of my favorite panels is just as they're I think Mario grabs onto a bullet bill and is racing towards the castle to rescue Princess Peach. Precisely as he's racing towards the castle, she passes him on the way out. So she would have been fine. She would have gotten out on her own. And the hero ends up captured, and they have to rescue him. Right? It's adult level, cleverly written, ironic situations.
There's also some cross dressing involved.
Yes.
Oh man. Yeah.
A recurring theme with Luigi specifically.
Yeah. Okay, I do have to point this out. This comic anticipates, predicts, prophesies Super Mario Odyssey like 30 years ahead. I just want to revel in that. This exact Bowser in a tuxedo, walking with trying to marry Princess Peach. This very
does it prophesy or does it inspire?
I know that Nintendo has taken direct inspiration from comics before. The Ruto characters in Wind Waker were directly inspired by characters created by the Zelda manga team, Akira Himakawa. So it's completely within the realm of possibility that Nintendo was reading, the actual game developers at Nintendo were reading these comics.
Ray Cortex asks, are there any Xbox comics? Metal?
What do you mean by Xbox comic? I mean, I don't think there's any about the Xbox itself, but there are games
Halo.
that have had comics. Yeah, like there's Halo.
That's a good. There you go.
It has
there
like
you go.
a
Halo.
manga and an adaptation.
Yeah,
of it.
there's a couple of Fallout comics too. I don't know that they ever. I think there's web comics though.
Okay.
But,
So here's a thought. As I'm looking over all of this, and clearly this has a very anime manga influenced artwork to it, as opposed to the very, very different American, stylized artwork and design of characters of the cartoon. Especially if you look at Peach herself, like she's clearly got the official Nintendo design going on there, with her dress and color of hair and everything. And so it makes me wonder, is it possible this is originally a Japanese comic and has been translated?
I looked that up. So Charlie Nizawa was a manga artist, but he was specifically asked to design this in a left to right English reading format. So it was made for English Nintendo Power readers. So in his career, he might, draw, traditional right to left manga for, I think he mostly worked for elementary school age. I can't remember the Japanese name of it, but I think he worked for an elementary school age comic magazine. So he's drawing in his style, but he's basically translating his style into Western comics and Western
It's Americanized.
sound effects.
It's an Americanized manga essentially.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, awesome.
But it's clearly
works.
done,
It works.
according to Nintendo designs and wishes, as opposed to where the cartoon was kind of just like, hey, we need you to make a Mario cartoon.
Definitely, yeah. He has the Japanese artistic sensibility to it.
But these characters also feel more their age, right? So like the Deke cartoon was trying to make them kind of fit in line the fact that like Captain Lou was playing Mario, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to this where it's been stated before, Mario's current age is about 26. When he was Jumpman and Donkey Kong, when he first showed up, he was supposed to be 18. So everything that happens for Mario happens between the ages of 18 and 26. That also means for most of this time, Princess Toadstool was a minor, right? So you have to think about like the ages of these characters, and they actually look younger and like they're age appropriate in this comic as opposed to in the cartoon.
Interesting.
All right. So okay, let's
So that's there to explain the respectful distance that Mario always seems to show toward.
Yeah. Well, because
I don't
not like Lana,
so,
where Lana is clearly an adult and her dad went missing. Peach has not been coronated. She's not of the age of coronation. That's kind of always been the lore for Mario.
I don't know if Nintendo is. I think they've gotten a lot better at paying attention to their lore details, but some of them I think were a bit slipshod early on.
No, I think they just retcon everything about every 3 years.
I'm just saying that there's not necessarily like even with like Zelda, like it was just like all over the map until they decided, okay, we're gonna do Hyrule Historia and actually like put it.
But Peach was always treated as like an older teenager.
Now she got married in the OVA. She just didn't get married to Mario in the spoilers. So she's. There doesn't seem to be much well, the OVAs are completely weird. So I don't think Nintendo knew what they wanted to do with
I don't think Toadstool was ever meant to be a lolly, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Well, don't forget
not a lolly, but a teenager's not a lolly.
2 things here is that in Japan the age is actually lower. 2,
everybody's younger in Japan. People are born before birth.
No. 2 is that I gotta say, until Super Mario Odyssey, I do not believe I have ever seen a single shred of evidence to suggest that there is actually supposed to be anything going on between Mario and Peach.
I feel like people suspect it. Okay, so
they jump to conclusion because of the hero, and she gives him a kiss when he rescues her. But it's always just been like, here's the hero, here's the princess, and that's the line.
No, Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars gives them more.
Yeah. Even the Mario and Luigi games later too give them more. Like it kind of follows that path line.
I feel like Nintendo wants it to be. Nintendo wants it to exist in a G-rated universe, right? But the suggestion of at least the G-rated suggestion of romance, I feel like that's been pretty consistent.
Yeah. It's and like I said, it's pretty reinforced in certain instances, especially when they start playing with the wedding imagery. Like I said, in the Super Mario RPG, there's some pretty heavy, like things going on. Not heavy, but like
those are about the ages that I've always seen too. Looking into it, is that between first appearance and now, Peach has been like 15 to 20.
Interesting.
Well, or maybe they're all just actors on the stage.
Because like the age of coronation in most.
You mean like Super Mario 3, where they're technically in a play?
Yeah. But it's always been about 16 to 18, depending on society. So 15 always made sense.
Alrighty.
Okay, all right. So Peach lolly discussion out of the way.
So that makes Koopa a real creeper.
Okay, that's not
Mario,
what we're.
Well, no. So he wants to marry her so he can have her kingdom, right?
Right.
Instead of just taking it over through bloodshed and war, if you actually marry the ruler, then you have like inheritance rights to the kingdom.
Right, but if
he uses his army to kidnap.
I'm just saying, if she's 15 at the first time he tries to pull this scheme.
Rhys, Mario follows the Mushroom Kingdom follows middle age rules for royalty.
Yeah, but how old is Koopa?
I don't know how old he's supposed.
I mean, are we going in turtle years?
Turtle year.
Okay.
I think he's supposed to be about Mario's age.
Okay.
He definitely feels younger in this comic, right? Like he even kind of comes off as a goofy teenage boy who's never who still gets nervous around
right.
girls.
I'm gonna shut down I'm gonna shut down the age discussion on
It's
the
like casting a teenager in a movie. They're clearly 25.
This is not the direction I wanted to go. I was just saying that the art actually makes them feel like their actual ages, as opposed to the American art.
All right. So I think
I appreciate the idea of young man Mario, especially in the first chapter, because he's just this super hardworking blue collar guy. He's like, okay, we've got this job. We've been hired to do this job. We can do this job. Click, split. It's gonna be great. So,
I think the real answer is that what's Bowser's age? He's old enough to know better. So that's we'll go with that. And he's so let's talk about let's do Carmen Sandiego next.
okay.
Yeah.
Now this one's a ride.
I think this is a case where I flip
Was this Rhys's pick?
Yeah.
Yes.
Had you read this before?
On recommendation.
I had not read it before. I had not read it till today.
You picked a comic you hadn't read as your favorite video game.
So here's part of the thing. I picked it because like that was like my favorite video game growing up, right?
Okay.
And so when
Which
I found
one
out
specifically?
the Where in the USA and Where in the World.
Okay.
So those are just like my favorite video game. Both of them. I had the Where in the USA is Carmen Sandiego on 5 1/4 floppies, and then I had Where in the World is on 3.5. I mean, 3.5 floppy.
I had them. Where in Time was my favorite edutainment game ever as a kid, because then you also had time. You had all of that plus time travel.
Google, I was saying the internet kind of ruined this game as a series in a lot of ways.
I would agree. Because you could just look it up on the internet instead of having to remember anything. And one of the great things about this is from the time I was tiny, I've always loved detectives and spies, right?
Yeah.
Which is why Spy X Family might be
High
the
five.
best comic ever. Anyway,
it's pretty good.
But it's so good. But anyway, but I've always loved detectives and spies. I love the aesthetic of all of that, the slouch hats and the trench coats, and if I wore my hair short, I would dress more like that than I do. It looks really silly with long hair. Anyway, moving on. So I've always loved this thing. So when I have the chance of the game, and I love maps and I love geography, and I love the clues where they had to kind of figure out who people were based. They had the book of your suspects and all that kind of stuff. So I loved that thing, and I would come home from school and watch the PBS game show on that that was based on it and everything. So I picked this based upon my love of the property. But when I was looking into it a little bit to kind of find out, because one of the things we had in our back chats was this based on the cartoon? Was this based on the point and click game? What was it based on? So I tried looking up the timeline of Carmen Sandiego stuff. I had no idea there were that many products with it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's even what I was saying. Like, it's kind of based on everything, like based on this, based on this, based on that, and that. Mm-hmm. Like, there's a bunch of different through lines for it. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of like an amalgamation of the feeling of a cartoon, but bringing in as if the game exists in the universe itself.
It's a way to
like
recruit.
A mechanic for
they made the video
people.
game as a way to recruit kids to help
into
catch the real Carmen
community.
Sandiego.
Which is a kind of a trope inside of the game show version of the thing too.
Yes.
So, but this is the funniest bit of Carmen Sandiego trivia that I found. The fourth official Carmen Sandiego game was Where in North Dakota is Carmen Sandiego. It was made in conjunction between Border Bound and like the Department of Education there in North Dakota. It's like
first the world, tomorrow North Dakota. They're extremely hard to conquer.
To be
those
fair,
Dakotans.
if somebody just started wandering around in North Dakota, it would be pretty hard to find them.
No, I do have the Enchanted Highway, and that's cool, but I was just like, wait a second.
First of all, Carmen Sandiego is not in North Dakota because if she's going to steal anything, she's going south of the border to get Mount Rushmore. I'm just saying.
So this is probably one of those cases where I'm going to say I think I like the cartoon more than the comic.
Well,
and I do love
the cartoon when it came out. So
I do love the games too, and I do think it was cool because even if you didn't know all the facts, it encouraged you to go to an atlas or to go to an encyclopedia, crack open a book so that you could beat a video game. And I always love when video games have that sort of kind of paratextual element where you have to kind of use something outside of the video game, kind of like Star Tropics, where you have to dip the manual in water, just cool stuff like that. And Carmen Sandiego was an easy way to, in an educational setting, basically make your kids go crack open an encyclopedia or a map or something so they could kind of, solve the case. And like I said, the internet kind of ruined that. So, so this is definitely a product of its time in a lot of ways.
Definitely.
And I think that
it also depends because there's kind of like certain things develop kind of like an honor code. So if you've ever been in the GeoGuessr community, it is heavily, heavily frowned upon to cheat. Right, you only use the GeoGuessr, and people will even stream doing it, and they'll block people from their chat if they give the answer and it looked like they had Googled it, like the answer's too specific. Mm-hmm. So there's some people who want that type of experience, and it's actually more people than you think.
Speedrunning community for Carmen Sandiego has to have no internet speedrun category.
But then, how do you stream it?
So here's the problem. Yeah, the speedrunners just memorize all the answers. So
yeah, once you have the answers memorized, you know which ones are coming.
Exactly.
Up
yeah.
So anyway,
I want to speak to what Twitless said about contrasting the comic with the cartoon real quick. So the cartoon seems to lean into the slightly semi-serious element of Carmen Sandiego, where it's like she's an alluring master thief, and this comic completely leans into this being a satire, like completely self-aware that this is ridiculous.
Pure absurdity.
Well, and like one of the things I thought was, well, I guess their treatment of Carmen Sandiego in the comic was really interesting because she's not actually there. But so
well, as she should be. Some of the best stories with Carmen Sandiego is where she's at the periphery, barely in it at all. That's what makes her so mysterious and elusive and makes you want to catch her. It's really, the more you actually like just show her, the more of her mystique you lose. And like I said, I think in the video game, I remember when my sisters and I finally caught Carmen Sandiego after years of trying to, kind of figure it out and figuring out how to make the computer work half the time. But yeah,
years?
Well, just computer problems.
Bad at geography, huh?
No, it was computer problems mostly.
Maybe you should have started with the fourth game, Twitless.
We couldn't get it to work on our PC. My gosh.
A poor workman blames his tools.
Children, ladies and gentlemen, back in the day, when computers were when home computers were new, there was no guarantee that when you got a CD-ROM, and that's the game we had. We had the Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego on CD-ROM. There was no guarantee that the CD-ROM would work on your PC. It was a crapshoot sometimes, whether or not it would just barf out and not work. So yeah, those were the days I was trying to play Carmen Sandiego.
My friends thought I was nuts because I was heavily a PC gamer back then.
Yeah, I bet.
I was playing Rayman on my computer.
Oh, poor guy. So to tie it back to Carmen Sandiego, I remember just her being very elusive, and so when we finally caught her, it was oh yeah, it was really cool. So it's Carmen Sandiego is a character who it's usually good to use her very sparingly, even though she's technically the headliner for the.
Well, so one of the things that this thing I think did really fun. Now, if you guys played the first, like I said, I only played the first two games. Where in the USA and Where in the World, and one of the fun things about it was you'd follow clues around the globe depending on what got stolen, what got left behind, who people saw. You'd interview people on the street, and then you have to piece together who you thought was the henchman who had stolen the Liberty Bell or whatever, and then if you can find them, you can try to predict based on their habits that you have from their crime file where they're going to show up next. And if you show up next, then you got to go ahead and try to catch them before they steal what they're going to steal next, because the NPCs will have claimed to have overheard them say thus and such. Well, that happens in the book, and they actually catch on that where like that's one of the plot points once they introduce the detective. Oh, okay, I got ahead of something here. So the story starts being narrated by one of the chiefs of the Acme International Detective Agency, and he goes and tells this backstory for Carmen Sandiego. Basically, that she didn't start as this world thief of world things. She started as a detective for the Acme Agency, but she was so good at detecting things, she got bored and decided she'd just be a crook. and so then they're trying to scour the world to find out somebody who's a good enough detective to catch Carmen. And so they've developed the video games as a recruiting tool to find the greatest starfighter. I mean, to find the greatest detective. And they find this kid. I'm going to forget his name.
Evan. I think it's Evan.
Yeah, it's Evan. It's like Evan Powell or something. It's a real boring name. Forrester, just a normal Joe name. And he's like just this 10-year-old kid who played like 5,000 hours of Carmen Sandiego.
Was it 1 million? I thought it was like a
5 million games.
Yeah, it was like
5 million game.
It went so over the top.
It was ridiculous. Yeah.
Okay, so this comic is like so absurd.
Yeah. Oh, it's definitely plays into the absurdism, which is part of the original gameplay too, because like all of the henchmen, where they were stealing these ridiculous things you can't possibly drive away with.
Decades before Despicable Me did it, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like 30 years. But so like in this comic, they steal the Nazca lines, which if you guys don't know, are like the largest sculptures on Earth. They're like,
There's like right.
Wait a second, Marmaduke, on Twitter, was it yesterday? Were you posting stuff about?
I posted it, yeah, because I couldn't believe it when I found out that was real. I had never heard of it before.
Oh yeah,
wow.
It's acres. Yeah, so they stole something that's literally acres wide, and they're just selling it on
the internet. Yeah, they're putting it up on eBay. But yeah, it's enormous, and there's bunches of these giant sculptures that are just made out of earthen structures that you can see. They didn't know it was even there until they started flying planes. That's things, and like if you were ever into like ancient alien theories, there's theories about aliens building the Nazca lines. They could see them like comics from space. It's crazy talk. But yeah, that was an old thing. So, but yeah, so they're I can't remember where I was going with all of that.
They also steal the Eiffel Tower.
Oh, they steal the Eiffel, yeah, definitely,
and they wrap it in curtains, so people just assume it's modern art. And they mentioned that was inspired by Cristo. So even their gag at the expense of modern art, they turned it into a little educational moment.
Yeah. And they replaced the Eiffel Tower with a plastic one that melted in the sun because it got too hot. And they said that it's the spirit. It reflects the spirit of the French after having the Jerry Lewis marathon being interrupted.
No offense, this was the low point in the reading for this week, in my opinion. I might be in the minority there, but I did not enjoy this one as much.
Oh, I loved it.
I liked how the video game was integrated into it. I liked how they stuck with the consistent goofiness, and I do feel the goofiness is they took inspiration. The goofiness is in the game, so they took inspiration from the game.
It is a little ramped up though.
I just wish the mystique element was a little strong. One thing I did like is I liked how they made it a consistent running gag that a 12-year-old's a detective, and they just keep saying, "Well, yeah, I cracked my first case when I was 10. I cracked my first case when I was 6 years old," because that is the target audience. The target audience is like 10 to 12-year-old kids who think it would be so cool to catch bad guys. And what do bad guys do? Well, obviously, what bad guys do is they steal the Eiffel Tower. What else would you do if you were?
I was a little disappointed. One of the things that I love about Carmen Sandiego, no matter what version of it, is how well they would often use puns in the names. They do really clever things. I remember catching Hal E. Tosis and Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? And I remember Pencil. Isn't there one called Pencilhead? It was one of the earlier ones. And there's just literally, she just had like hair that looked like a pencil. So like, I felt like I felt a little let down with the names and the villains. I feel like as opposed to the games.
I just appreciated that they had a shot of Robo Thief in there.
A Robo Crook?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So like I said, not to rain on anybody's parade, but wasn't as big of a fan of this one. But I will say one very positive thing about it. If you're gonna go absurd, they chose an absurdist. They leaned into that in the art style. Like this art feels very much absurd, and so it's very, at least I would say, from an art direction, it's consistent with the medium and the message are both consistent, which is nice.
I did get a weird feeling. I have a weird feeling that this artist is a superhero artist, and like they asked him to do a cartoony style on purpose. So something about it says this guy would rather be drawing giant, buff, realistic-looking men in skin-tight spandex.
Wouldn't we all?
Well, no, I would agree because it's cartoony art that feels like it's drawn by somebody who doesn't normally cartoon.
I can see that. One of the things I liked about the story structure-wise is that every one of the things that was stolen has a reason within the plot. Like part of the reason the Eiffel Tower was stolen was because the Eiffel Tower actually like picks up radio signals because it's 1,000 feet tall antenna. So that was part of why they stole it, is so they're using it for their pirate radio station that broadcasts around the planet from the Eiffel Tower, hidden in a different French town just 100 miles up the road.
So another unpopular opinion. I know I'm just Debbie Downer here. I prefer Carmen Sandiego being a straight villain, or most like 90% villain. I am not a fan of she's actually a misunderstood heroine.
Well,
and
I don't necessarily think that's the take of it as a whole. Like, okay, that's kind of spoils the end of it. But
that's also what I was going to say. There's modern incarnation. I think they went in that direction.
Okay. I see what you're saying.
So what I'm trying to say is that like she's been portrayed differently over time, and sometimes they really lean into she's actually basically the hero of the story, and I'm like, no, it's much more fun when other people are just trying to catch her, and you're doing your cops and robbers thing. I prefer that version of it.
Now, I recall in the game they did have the point that she was an ex-Acme agent.
Correct.
I even think there was a plot point that she got bored.
She was their best agent.
So she's a villain, but she's a villain who's motivated by a desire to prove her intellect. She's motivated by boredom rather than motivated by maliciousness. So she might not. I actually thought it kind of fit with her character that she might not even want to profit off these items. She's more like Lupin the Third. She's like Lupin the Third. Gentleman Thief Lupin. She purely wants the thrill of the chase between her and the detective.
The sport.
Yeah.
I guess I'm okay with that. Like I said, I like her being the antagonist, and sometimes they really want to. No, she's the protagonist. Screw that.
No, we don't need to redeem all of our villains. So it's okay to have some villains.
We don't, but here's the thing. In the cartoon in the 90s, the best episodes were always those where she would find herself in a situation where she had to work with the heroes. And so that kind of thing always made me want to see the heroic side of her.
She's not an irredeemable villain. She's the kind of villain. Okay, I say this about Joker a lot. Joker in the Dick Spring era you would want to live in Gotham City where that Joker existed, because he wouldn't really hurt anybody. He just run around stealing giant whoopee cushions.
Right. Yeah, that's right. The Cesar Romero Joker as well.
Yeah, Cesar Romero Joker. Yeah, Carmen Sandiego is the kind of villain that would motivate a kid to stop her, but her villainy is it's a child's understanding of what a supervillain might do, which makes her kind of a very inherently charming character.
Like Lex Luthor stole this many cakes.
Yeah. Someone just needs to tell her to stop doing that and send her to her room, and she'll learn to be good.
No, she'll just learn how to escape from her room. But that's the type of character she is.
That's the worst.
All right. So we do want to keep things moving because we still have 2 more comics to get to.
Oh, God.
No.
Yeah.
So any parting thoughts on Carmen San
No,
Diego?
this wasn't. I hadn't read this before today. I'm really glad. I can't say this is necessarily my favorite video game comic, having read more of them than just Batman Fortnite. But I am really glad we picked this one. So,
right.
and I'll probably read the rest of the series.
I recommended it because I didn't know you liked Carmen San Diego, but you
yeah.
struck me as the type of guy who would like Carmen San Diego.
Well, good call, Metal. Good call.
Good call. Thank you. Metal with the win.
So Metal didn't suggest Captain Ed. Okay, I got completely mixed up on the Captain.
No. Captain Ed was my pick, but Rhys didn't have one, so he struck me as the type of guy who liked Carmen San Diego, and I suggested
you helped him. Okay,
that's fair. Mrs. H is in chat. Good to see you. And we have Ravensloft saying Batman Fortnite.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask, where is our video game pickle?
Oh jeez.
Don't just solicit the pickle, man.
Yeah. You have to let it happen organically.
Jeez.
An organic pickle, eh?
Yeah.
Pickle solicitation just sounds so wrong.
It's Sonky and City of Heroes that are left.
Yeah, let's
and Hiroshi says you've read Earthworm Jim. That's a video game comic. Yes, that is true. But the chances of everybody being able to get a hand on the recent Earthworm Jims would be more difficult, and the old school Earthworm Jims are also pretty hard to get a hold of. But I decided just to go ahead and go with Carmen San Diego, because I was such a fan of the video. I didn't play Earthworm Jim until I was grown, and I played it like 3 times. But I was keen on the Earthworm Jim comic because I was keen on so many other Tenaple books first. So anyway, moving on.
Right.
It's also good because we have a whole segment where we study Doug Tenaple works, so we're probably going to get to some of the stuff like that anyway at some point. So it's kind of cool to sometimes diversify our picks here.
Here we go. The Carmen San Diego kids. That would be a perfect 80s property.
But it's just that would work. Okay, so let's do City of Heroes so we can end on Sonic. I think Sonic's a good ending point. So let me share. So we read. I wanted to pick something that would fit some of our discussions on the video game-ness of some of these books. So I picked the last 2 issues actually of the Blue King Studios City of Heroes comic. City of Heroes is a still technically running superhero MMORPG. It is one of the best superhero video games on the planet still.
Do you still play?
I may or may not have met Omega Girl and actually started that collaboration on that exact video game. So it's still inspiring me today. But it's great. And one of the things that makes it so great is the fact that it's got one of the best character creators still, like 20 years later. Is it 20 years? 15? It's been a while. 15, 20 years, something like that.
I think it was very, very early. It was not one of the earliest MMOs, which it has to be less than 20 because Final Fantasy 11 just did its 20th anniversary. So 15 is probably.
But it was made by the same studio who made World of Warcraft, though.
I got confused with Omega Girl since the COG fan. It's not technically. It's inspired by. I'm not setting my Omega Girl in Paragon City. So we could do a whole show on City of Heroes.
That is a fun game. I got in around the villains time, but
that's when I did too. Yeah. Okay, so what's really cool is the fact that this particular book has got some very interesting things. Yeah, I've got some people in chat remembering City. Everyone who remembers City of Heroes remembers it fondly. I don't think I've really run into anybody who says, "Oh, City of Heroes was the worst game ever." Everyone says, "Oh yeah, it was a great game."
It doesn't help that everyone has tried to do the same thing since has done it not as well.
Correct. But to jump back into the comic here, I believe this is I think the writer was like on staff for the game. And so the Blue King Studio was kind of like a studio made, I think, from the video game studio. So that's why I chose this one. There's actually a Dark Horse comic, and then there was a Top Cow series that is based more on the signature heroes. There's like Statesman and the Freedom Phalanx, the NPCs essentially. And so there's a comic series that's based on the NPCs, but we ain't got time for that. So what's more interesting is to look at the fact that this particular book channeled a lot of the energy from that character creator that I mentioned. And so
first of all, I had some questions about this that I don't know if I don't want to totally derail stuff, but my impression with getting this in was like the first 10 pages, I was completely confused about everything going on. Right? Like I was just like, did I get the right issues?
Well,
I felt like
I'm going to tell you right
of
now, I don't think I did, because this cover does not look familiar at all.
These are the last two issues. It's 11 and 12.
11 and 12.
So I did choose the last two, and so I did throw you guys into the deep end. The reason why I chose these last two issues is because I think they have the most resonance with the video gaminess of this being a comic.
I was actually pretty impressed. I did feel like, okay, I'm definitely getting into the deep waters, and some things have happened that I've missed. But I felt like, if you don't know all the lore, you kind of know, well, the bad guy is attacking and the hero is running around in a shower curtain. So they kind of know how to have a comedic through line. So I don't know much about him, but I know that, he's not in the best position right now, and he still has to fight bad guys in a towel. So I feel for him.
So the basic pitch.
Can I have you? Can I make a request?
Yes.
Can you sing the song the dude's singing in the shower there?
I can't because it's too. It's I'm actually have to be a little more quiet. I would. But
we don't want IRL people thinking Twitless
right.
is a madman.
I'm washing off grime. I got fighting grime. I'm scrubbing off dirt. I got punch and jerks. I'm using shampoo, so why can't? All right, so there you go. That's the best. Very good. All right. So the pitch here is the fact that these heroes on the front, our three main heroes here, get thrown together, and they basically start having adventures and fighting villains. And the villains they're fighting are basically the NPC groups from the City of Heroes game. Now, in the last two issues, things kind of amp up a notch. We have on our left, that's War Witch. She's a magical sorceress type fighter. The guy in the middle is basically your street kind of Batman level. I just fight crime. And the guy on the right is Horus. And he is supposed to be a technological Iron Man hero, but we find out later he's been possessed by an alien, and that's why he has weird kind of goopy alien powers. So that's kind of like our trio, and they've been
goopy,
fighting.
Meaning he's covered in bacon grease.
Yeah. So in the last two issues, things amp up because we get to fight Requiem, who is our evil. Essentially Nazi villain who is also possessed by an alien, which is why he has crazy tentacle goopy monster powers. And he starts the issue off by murdering War Witch's coven. So she's in the astral plane, and our alien psychic parasite can kill everybody in the psychic plane, so it's no longer a safe space. So then we jump back into reality here, and our heroes are trying to help out War Witch. What gets interesting, though, and this is where the video gameness happens, is they're dealing with a crazy villain who's murdered a bunch of people. And then this scene happens right here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Okay, so suddenly...
I did notice. This scene was amazing.
This scene's great. So this scene is where the video gameness of City of Heroes really comes into play. And I can mention this has been happening a little bit in previous issues. Because as far as I can tell, I couldn't get direct confirmation for this, but I think that for this run of the comic, that these every issue would have guest star heroes that would only be in like either that issue or maybe two issues tops, and you'd see them and then they would help out and then they would be gone forever. And the impression I got was that these were player characters that had gotten lucky enough to be included in the book. And when you see how they're, if you're familiar, Taylor or Cartoonicus, you can see those costume pieces, right? These come from the character creator. That I've used that headpiece on the pink chick on the bottom there. So what we have here is that we have our characters for the comic suddenly start getting attracting notice by random passerby heroes, and they suddenly just come in. Hello, is everything okay here? And what you're seeing is not just superheroes interacting. What you're basically seeing from a video game perspective is an MMORPG team that suddenly got new members kind of jumping in. And so this is one of the reasons why I picked these last two issues, because of this particular moment. And they actually play it off in a slightly funny way, because new heroes just keep on entering the scene every like 3 seconds. And our three main heroes are like, okay, can we stop? Can new heroes can please stop? Can we stop? And then eventually Warwitch just loses it. Would you please get the hell out of here? And then these three new heroes who we've never seen up to this point, who are basically player characters, are just like, no, we're here to help. And then that's just kind of how the show kind of runs for the rest of this particular issue. And so that's a way that the video gameness of the comic hits. And so I chose this comic because it's a superhero comic, but also works in some of the video game elements. So the second element that I want to bring up, which is I think even better than that one, comes from issue 12. So let me pull up. It's the actual the ending of the entire series. But the final conflict, they beat the bad guys. However, pretty much two of the three main characters basically die. So for this being a promotional comic, it's actually got some pretty heavy stakes. But the very end of it, Warwitch kind of passes on. We only have Apex, our street level hero, and the comic ends with him saying level 15 scrapper, looking for team, looking for group. And so the entire comic ends up kind of leading up to a go join the video game, go look for a team. And he's even listing his character level, and they work that into the comic book. And so I think it does a very interesting job of working in the video gamey elements.
Something you said really struck me, because as I was reading it, I did kind of have the moment where I said, oh, I don't know who all these characters are, but it was okay because I could tell the main characters didn't know either. I actually just assumed this video game must have like hundreds of characters that they're just promoting. So I didn't know anything about the character creation tool details that you picked up on. So I guess what's interesting about it is me not knowing the game at all. I was able to follow the basic plot and get that, okay, these characters have had their, I definitely got the video gamey feel, like, oh yeah, you must go play this game and be a superhero or whatever. But I had no idea that's how they were integrating it, yet it still worked for me as an outsider.
Yeah. I was vaguely familiar with it because I had some friends that were really into the game, but I never played it. This came out when I was real poor, like can't afford internet, don't have a good computer, real poor. So.
Yeah, this was back when any MMORPG was like $15, $20 a month on subscription monthly basis. So that could rack up pretty quickly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the other thing I'll mention, which I also think is really good, is that issue 12 is one of the because you can see this archive online as well, but these issues you could request like sent to you, and the print versions of all of them have these after materials that have like a lot of fan created
there was
stuff.
Something I was going to bring up in there too on the next page, I think.
So what's really awesome is that City of Heroes had some really heavy like fan commitment, and so short stories, fan art, using clips, like screenshots, and then like writing stories. So this is like somebody who wrote a story and then like clipped scenes to actually create.
Is that Lost? Tim Buckley, go up.
Yeah, no, yeah.
It's Lost. It's Lost.jpg.
He was a fan. Also, Scott Kurtz from PvP. He did some City of Heroes comics. I don't know if
Clevenger.
I don't know if his So there were some people who, for a time, actually did some City of Heroes material, and then some of it actually did get featured in the after pages of the book itself. So this was a really cool moment where the video game players contributed to basically fleshing out the lore in the game, and writing stories, creating art, and some very interesting stuff, actually.
Do you remember your open story? It was created in the forums.
Oh my gosh, can we not bring that up?
Oh,
Can we not bring up that I was a forum hound on the City of Heroes website? Can we not do that today?
people love that.
We could have, but
Cartoonicus is exposing all my secrets.
Does this have any connection to Omega? Okay, is Omega Girl in the comic anywhere? Did Omega Girl fan art make it in?
Into this, no. I met Omega Girl. I think was the game went dormant, like it canceled it. It went dormant for like 10 years, and then it was found out. It was leaked that some people had been running private servers, and then once it got leaked, they actually made the private servers public. And then so the game basically kind of came back, and NC Soft, who owns the IP, looked the other way. So the game essentially came back. You can go play it right now. And that's when I started playing again a few years ago, and that's when I had Omega Girl, and we had some really awesome storytelling things that will actually show up in the comic as we go. But I used our adventures in the game as a launching point, but not as a direct, like, it's not like a fan work or anything. We made our own stuff, but it's a great game.
I'm going to put in the chat the link you can go to if you want to play this game and how to get it up.
So this,
yeah,
that's
but like mentioning the fan stuff, that there's the comic right there by Brian Cleavager. So that's if I wasn't going Captain N, if I didn't want to do some officially licensed comic, I was going to go with 8-Bit Theater, which is probably my favorite webcomic of all time. And that's the creator of 8-Bit Theater right there at nuclearpower.com. The tag's even at the bottom of the page.
That's the four white mages will work comic, right?
Yes, that's it's basically just Final Fantasy, like a parody of it, going through the whole story.
Wait, where's Clevenger? Where did he show up?
It was that comic that Fan one. If you scroll back down, that you were just on it before.
Sorry, this one.
Yes.
Oh, you're right. That is Cleavager. Okay, because I recognize Buckley's art.
Mm-hmm.
So
he wrote.
So that's a collaboration between Nuclear Power and a Control Alt Delete. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. All right, and then they would advertise, hey, we want your fan stories, we want your art, and so like there's just something kind of cool about that, that the collaborative aspect of it, and the fact that you could go play the game, make your own hero, and then kind of essentially contribute to the comics themselves. That's just
well,
really
and that was so made the game so great, and still does to an extent, was really the community behind it. It was more than just something that the company created for you. It was something that the people themselves created together.
Yeah. So I do apologize if I tossed you in the deep end there and made you a little lost. But
well, no, that's fine. I mean, it was one of those things where you can pick up the highlights pretty
right.
easily. And like I said, there's talk about, oh, hey, okay, so these aliens invaded, and there was some, okay, it's a comic book universe, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah,
It's got some of that stuff's boilerplate. Like, I don't think it's germane to this story, so we'll just move past it.
Gotcha.
I was going to praise this comic as a great example of helping me who doesn't know it become actually interested in what the heck this world is. Like, art is great. It has a very 80s Marvel vibe to it. Like better than Marvel comics, frankly. Like a great entry, and even late in the story, still considerate of me as an outsider, maybe coming in for the first time.
Well, and it's like one of those things where it's every comic's somebody's first comic, right?
Yeah.
So, which is something we can talk about at the end of the show later. I've got something to talk about that later. But
they put their heart, kind of like with Valiant. I think it's kind of like with Valiant with what we had earlier. They put their heart into this one, and it doesn't feel as much of a cash grab. It feels like we meant to tell this. We wanted to tell this story, and so I appreciated that genuine spirit to it. I think
I would say aesthetically there was one significant issue that I had with this comic aesthetically. It's that Apex is supposed to be some sort of martial arts street level fighter, and his outfit is the least fight-friendly, fisticuff-friendly outfit I've ever seen ever.
Welcome to the comic. Welcome to the character creator of City of Heroes.
And welcome to superheroes.
Well, so
General.
my thing was, I like this comic conceptually. I've read it before, so I actually have the context before these pages. And I have to say this was my least favorite read. I like all the fan related stuff afterwards, and I like the idea of the comic. But one of the problems I had with this comic originally is it just seemed way too much like a standard Cape comic, despite but it makes sense because of the game it came from. But it just it didn't really do it for me.
Cape comics.
Well, I think when you're familiar enough with the video game mechanics, because like there's another thing they mentioned earlier, like, oh, why aren't they getting med ported, right? Because in the video game, whenever you get defeated, you don't die, you get teleported to a medical facility. So there were like several moments where it's like the video gameness of it, but the very end of it with the clear LFG. You know, how many times have we all typed //
Most
LFG?
used letters in history.
I'll speak for yourself. I was always a solo player.
LFG or LFT.
So that's why I picked these two issues specifically, because
it's cool. I like it.
There are some issues where I agree, Metal, that there are some issues that play a little more straightforward into just superhero book. But these two in particular were like, that moment where the video game characters just like keep entering the scene.
Well, I agree
like
with that.
drop-ins.
And from what I remember of it too, like that, this is definitely the most gaminess of it. But
well, especially when you're on a team and trying to keep up the quota of 8 players, and then somebody drops, and now you're like looking for member, and you add somebody else, and then 2 more drop, and you add 2 more, and
your entire team's completely different.
Right.
But anyway, But we should probably keep moving. But that was my pick. I kind of snuck in a superhero book.
I like that.
But
I just wish I had read the right issue.
All right, so we don't have we gotta try to cram Sonic in.
Oh dear, here we go.
We only got 2 issues of Sonic to talk about.
We do, but
Cartoonicus wants to spend a good 3 hours dissecting the psychology of
I
contenders.
have spent the last 4 weeks cutting down from a story that essentially takes place over an entire year to try to fit into a 15-minute presentation. Why did I just lose?
On Ken Pender specifically?
Yeah, good point.
Well, as a matter of
write
fact, the story we're going to read today owes its existence to a man named Ken Penders, exactly. And I'm sure everyone who's read it is wondering what the heck I'm talking about. But I will start by giving you a little screen share. For those who do not know, one of the most infamous and famous writers in all of comic book history, definitely the most famous and most infamous writer in Sonic comics, definitely. I am going to post here
Are you posting his new stuff?
No, I won't hurt everybody. We'll have to. This is one thing I realized while preparing for this, is that we're going to have a Sonic night, because the history of this entire franchise is just too big.
Come back in October.
Yeah.
Ken Pender's leaving was the best thing that ever happened to Sonic.
In many ways, yes, and for multiple reasons.
To defend him a little bit, he did lionize the echidnas, and I love me some echidnas. So I'll give him
egg-laying mammals. That's what it's about.
But I'm going to show.
We never would have gotten so many stories and lore from echidnas, I think, without Penders. So,
all right, I want to share this little tweet that happened shortly after Sonic 2 came out, the movie.
Oh gosh!
And someone asked him, off topic, will you be seeing Sonic 2? I loved it. I'm interested to hear your opinion and their take on Knuckles, yada, yada, yada. Penn says, I'll be honest, I really don't know. The trailers I've seen have hit way too close to home. I feel like they read my story from Sonic 13. It also is a real case of missed opportunities. Can't help what I lived through. Basically, he's accusing the movie of stealing his story.
Because he created Knuckles' dad, therefore he owns the
Yes.
concept of Knuckles' dad.
In another tweet, he literally writes, "Oh, believe me, I had raised eyebrows when I learned of Knuckles' dad. Someone has some splaining to do." He's saying because they gave Knuckles a father in a movie, they stole his idea.
He legitimately sued. He sued. He sued them after he left because he wanted all of the Echidna stuff.
Well, here's what happened.
And that's not how any of that works.
Here's what happened. Sega made a game. I'm looking for called
Chronicles.
Yeah, it was called Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood.
Yeah.
He looked at it and was convinced that they had stolen a bunch of plot device from it, from his comics, and he flipped out, sued the pants off them.
He didn't win. He didn't win.
He won the rights to his
because
characters.
Archie failed to produce the copyright that should have been just an open and shut case. And the result would end up being that Sega got all those characters got ripped away from the comic. They practically had to reboot the entire thing. Sega got really mad at Archie, and it would only be a few years before they ended up just giving up on them altogether. And now IDW has Sonic instead, and that entire universe just went to pot. And everyone who loves that universe blames Penders and yada yada yada. But as you said, him leaving might have been the greatest thing that ever happened to the comics because it paved the way for a man named Ian Flynn,
who wrote this issue.
Who is now, oh gosh, what do we got here? Is this a joke to you? USDA. Oh, organic pickles. Got it. But yes, Ian Flynn has become known as a god among Sonic writers. So much so that they have finally started using him to write the games. After the previous writer of the games, for the last 10 years, the games have been written by a guy who admitted in an interview that when he first started with Sega, he had never played a Sonic game. He just went to the Wikipedia page and looked up the characters. And everyone has hated these stupid games ever since.
That's
now
amazing.
they've been begging Sega, like, we have someone who knows how to write these characters, just hire the guy. And apparently they finally did for these last two games that are, one came out already, it was Sonic Origins, and the other is being made, Sonic Frontiers. But you are about to find out why, perhaps, Ian Flynn is possibly my favorite Sonic.
Okay, I was mistaken. Because he sued so many times,
that's true.
He lost the lawsuit against Sega, but Archie settled with him, and he got like 200 like all the Echidna characters essentially, which they then wrote out of the story. So he kind of, I wouldn't say he won that lawsuit, but he kind of won it. But the one against Sega Court, no, he didn't win that one. So he's sued multiple times.
Right. And I think he tried to sue the movie too. Anyway, here is the result. Let me get this up. Where's I spent over an hour today trying to put together a PDF rather than trying to deal with these websites.
Well, I've got it pulled up if you need images.
No, I've got a special presentation I created.
Oh, a special presentation.
Oh yeah, yep. I just have to find it in my tabs. Here it is.
So while he's saying that, I do have to say that no matter how people feel about the Sonic comic, yay or nay, I do think that it's one of the better versions of Knuckles outside of the OVA that we've got. Knuckles is clever. He's instinctive. He's not an idiot. He's a really cool guy. And part of that's because Penders, I think, liked him a lot. And so Knuckles gets a lot of love in this comic. So the series.
I like this comic. What I would say about this comic is I think this is a really well executed couple of issues. I don't like the complexity of the universe.
Well, again, a lot of that has to do with the universe.
Oh, really?
So
So many people love it for that complexity, though.
That's exactly what we're about to talk about. Because with Pender's leaving, Ian Flynn basically got dumped in a universe that was as messy as you can possibly imagine, and was put in charge of somehow making sense of all this crazy nonsense. So what we see him do, we're going to jump back a little bit, and I promise I pared this down so we can run through it real quickly. But a year before all this starts, he started with Sonic 160, and
it's like magic.
He started had to cleaning up all this stuff, and he started writing out all these different characters that Pender's created. He completely destroyed the source of all, which was a crazy thing that was like controlling the universe at that point. He kills off Eve, one of Robotnik's android characters. He killed off Sir Connery, which
I thought that was Link. I was like, oh.
He killed off Anton's dad. You can see him that's right. He killed off Tommy the Turtle, and really a heartbreaking story. Has having to do all this cleanup, right? Because suddenly these characters are being just yanked away. Then he starts doing some cool stuff, at least some less depressing stuff. He brought back Tails' mother and father from way, way back when Sonic had been transported to some alternate planet. So he brings them into the universe. He brings.
Wait a second. Isn't every other planet an alternate planet?
Good point. But it wasn't Mobius. It wasn't often that Sonic went into space. There was some really...
Mobius is the planet where a lot of Sonic media is assumed to be on, if he's not on Earth.
Yeah. So he brings back Tails' parents. He heals the king, Sally and Elias's father, brings him back. He's okay. Anton and Bunny get married finally.
So some of these characters will be recognizable if you'd seen the Sonic Saturday AM morning cartoon. Yep. So Princess Sally, Bunny, who's a half roboticized rabbit. But if you're not familiar with this, these are just characters that have been part of this particular branch of Sonic storytelling for quite a while.
And of course, then there's this big wedding, and it's like, okay, the universe is starting to get cleaned up, and things are falling back into place. We're getting happy endings. Everything is just working out peachy, right? And then Robotnik attacks. And they tell this story where he finds Knothole, manages to infiltrate their base, and starts zapping them all with a ray that looks like it's disintegrating. What it actually is doing here is that it teleports them all back to his base, where it traps them in these egg grapes they're called, where he's using them for energy, which is an interesting callback to the original games. Long story short, only Sonic, Tails, Amy, and Knuckles are left. They have to mount this rescue mission. They break everybody out, and I won't do too many spoilers, but we end up in this new place called Mobotropolis, which is basically the new and improved Knothole. A new city for a new comic, basically, is what's happening here. Eggman, of course, he tries, he sends the fleet after them, tries to take them out. And this time they're ready for him, and they kick his butt.
So this is kind of basically what you're saying is a soft reboot.
Right.
This is a way of doing this.
This is Ian coming in and saying, okay, Pender's had his universe. I don't get to use any of that. So here I'm going to have to, create my universe and establish it.
Isn't that Knuckles girl a Pender's character, though?
Julie Sue, yeah.
Yes, and we'll get into that.
Okay. So one thing I want to take time to talk about this. This is how comics used to be, right? Like for 20 years after, for Marvel up until Civil War, all the way back to Stan Lee, but for DC Comics for 20 years, from 1985 up until actually 25 years up until 2003, if a new creative team came on, if they wanted to do something with it, they tell stories. Imagine this, people. They have to tell stories to establish the new paradigm under which the creative energies would be pushed forward. Right? So if the Bat offices got Nightwing, they have to explain why he isn't with the Teen Titans anymore and how he got an apartment in the city. Right?
Right.
By using stories to do it. Isn't that shocking? Isn't that a fascinating new way to do things?
Yeah, amazing.
Not just having Superboy punch a hole in space.
So okay, to be fair, the Sonic comics were not immune to that. Twice they did something called the Genesis Wave, which is basically a Crisis on Infinite Earths energy thing that erases continuity.
So at least one of those times, Sega was basically just completely conquering at that point, saying,
right.
We'll
so
this our way.
Right. So one thing that's also interesting about the Sonic comic is how the amount of influence that Sega corporate would at times exert and say,
and that's,
you will.
That's to be
mandate.
expected the licensed property. I'm just saying, like I have never read the Sonic comics, but hearing you describe the way this guy set up his paradigm, I have infinitely more respect for Sonic than I did an hour ago.
Or at least Ian Flynn.
I'd also like to pitch you on the Saturday morning cartoon, because the characters from the characters from the comic basically spin off of that. I think the Saturday morning cartoon is a top tier piece of children's media, and the reason I've kind of been hesitant about like fully diving in the Archie Sonic comics is I feel like Ken Penders didn't understand the appeal of those characters, but I definitely got the feeling from this that it was interesting that as I was reading it, I just thought Ian Flynn is such a great writer. He's actually trying to write a ship that's crashed on the rocks.
Which brings us to today's comic, which for those of you who really know any version of Sonic growing up, you may be looking at this cover going, what the heck? Who is the moron? But hold on. Remember, they brought back Tails' parents. And Flynn does something interestingly gutsy here. He immediately has Tails' father go out on a limb and decide to mount a coup against the royalty. He is completely decided he is against, that kind of monotone rule, and he wants a democracy. And so it's all over the news. He mounts this coup. It goes horribly wrong, and he is immediately imprisoned. And everybody's talking about it here. Tails is distraught. He just got his parents back, and now, all of this is happening. His father's been locked up, thrown in jail. He's being criminalized. And Sonic makes a dumb move, though he probably didn't really know that it was a dumb move. He speaks out and says, yeah, but like, he shouldn't be doing this. And poor Tails, right? He's all freaking out. This was the wrong thing to say. And so immediately Tails is just like, right? So everybody has an opinion. And what's her name? Nicole here points out, it's like, feel like you guys have been on a rocky edge for a while. And he's like, what are you talking about? We're best friends. We're always best friend. You're overblowing this. And he just zooms out and doesn't think anything of it. We can actually skip a little bit of this because, and this is really what I will talk about this though. Ian, one of the things he's really good at is he'll be telling one story and setting up 3 or 4 or 5 that he's going to be dealing with later in the background. So some of this stuff we can pass over because it's not going to make a ton of sense if we're not paying attention to the main storyline. And yeah, sorry, Twitless, we're going to have to pass over the Knuckles stuff.
No.
But although it probably is important to the story that he got him out of here, this for these two episodes, since it was going to be about Sonic and Tails
So
specifically.
he can come back as Enerjack, which is awesome. Enerjack is an awesome character.
Oh, we'll talk about Enerjack some other day. But okay, so Elias comes in to check on these prisoners. I love, by the way, how he writes Bean. This guy is such a whack job smart mouth, and he's absolutely hilarious as he does so. You gotta love the artwork of Tracy Yardley here, who Ian Flynn's a genius, but these two together were a power duo. You cannot talk about the Ian comics without also giving credit every time, in my opinion, to Tracy Yardley. But here they are all, talking about things, and basically Elias, he has been doubting himself as king ever since his father got sick and he had to take over. And he keeps making mistakes, and that just makes him doubt himself more. So all of this, the big question of who's in the right here is grating on him, right? And he has this conversation, of course, with Tails' father about what is a good government, what is right, how, is it right to conquer people and take their freedom away? Well, what if they're happy anyway? There's they go back and forth. Elias is just, by the end of this, here we go. He is just beating himself up. I have no idea how to handle this. Once again, this is all too big for me. I wish Dad could just take over and do this all for me, right? Sonic shows he is very loyal to the kingdom, as he always has been. I mean, that's pretty much everything he's ever known. He's been like Sonic. He's been that blue-collar hero of the kingdom since the beginning, right? So, we're going to move down. Meanwhile, Tails and his mom decide to do something really stupid. They're going to just sneak in and break his dad out. And, of course, Tails is now, every shot, by the way, that Tracy does is just so well designed and thought out. This all makes you feel like something is really happening here. Nothing ever feels like a static shot, even when there's absolutely no text going on. But they try to break in, and he's trying to, work his magic, get him out of here. Meanwhile, Sonic gets alerted that something is going on. By the way, I love that Sonic sleeps in a race car bed. Can we all just appreciate that shot for a second?
Now, I wonder if the movie writers read this, or if Sonic having a race car bed is such an obvious idea that they just thought of it independently.
I think it's the latter. I think it's really
the most obvious.
Where else would he be in?
Right.
Well, I will say this, much like the movie, they also show him without his shoes on, proving that those are, in fact, shoes, not his feet.
Oh, my gosh. Hero asks, is that Ixis Nagus back there? That is correct. That's Ixis Nagus.
Oh, yeah. They had every villain that wasn't taken away by Kent Penders was definitely in that cell. So, Sonic goes to check on things and catches him in the act, right? And okay. Tails kind of sneaks away, right? And so he's like, doing this whole Sonic thing.
I'm not used to angry Tails so much. He really make him mad in this issue.
Well, and you're about to see why, right? But Sonic is such an egomaniac, right? He just loves himself as the hero. And there he is playing it cool. It's like, I gotcha. You better go back in your cell. And, as they start arguing again, this whole thing, who's right, who's wrong. He started a riot against the king. What do you want? That's treason, right? And so the people are with him. Doesn't that tell you something? And they go back and forth. Tails is hiding over here, you notice. So Sonic clearly has not seen him. And then Sonic makes these stupid, his mother, of course, says, what are you going to do with Tails? Tails is basically he's never going to forgive you if you, side with the people who want to throw his father in jail. And then Sonic says the dumbest thing he's probably ever said. I know you're his real family, but he grew up with me. Heck, The kid probably worships me. He'll get over it. And this is just a beautiful shot with Tails in the background. Sonic completely unaware of his impending doom that he has just walked right into. Right? This... And oh wow, look at that. Look at that shot. For those who have not known much about this, what you have to understand is this is not one line. Tails has suffered abuse at the hands of Sonic's ego and
and everything.
Right.
And they set it up. They set it up well before this. So.
Much in the same way that you were talking about Mario and Luigi earlier, right? For years.
That being said, Tails also gets some of the strongest moments in the series because he's the one who takes down Mammoth Mogul.
He does.
So like he also has like a chosen one ability. So they do counterbalance.
What I mean though is he has looked up to Sonic every moment of his life, only to be constantly pushed aside as the little brother, right? Let Sonic just take that spotlight, always, be so full of himself, never give him really any credit, never see him as anything other than, and Sonic says it right here, that kid who worships me. And now Sonic is literally fighting to put his own parents in jail and not even thinking at all about how this is going to affect him. Just assume that this kid loves everything about me. I can do no wrong, right? So of course, Tails finally just snaps. And
so one thing about
go ahead.
One thing about this comic is the fact that this comic is probably one of the least. It's the least and the most, I think, of our books for today. There's less video gaminess in some respects because this is Sonic lore that's just kind of run away with itself for many years and it kind of become its, mutated in a petri dish and become its own thing that people love. That being said, as a book on its own that has developed its own lore that people just fell in love with, the amount of character relationships. This is not just about, Sonic, go collect some rings like a video game. This is a story that has pathos and friends. Friendships will be tested. Relationships will be forged in fire. People will die. Like that's the stakes that's going on in the Sonic comic, at least after a certain point when it transitioned away from being a humor strip. So that's what
I have loved about these comics. Especially compared to so many of the video games.
Sure.
Even Penders wrote some really good character development at times.
Yeah. I was going to say, he came up with Enerjack. He came up with some really interesting characters. So that's what makes, I think, what's really interesting is the fact that when you compare Mario media to Sonic media, Mario media tends to hit a more consistent middle ground, I think. Whereas Sonic's highs are higher, but Sonic's lows are always lower. And so in comics, the Super Mario comic, you're right, is very enjoyable and very artistic in some places, but you can't necessarily get very invested in the world.
Sonic is basically getting something like the Marvel and DC universe treatment, where people get invested in these overarching events over the course of decades. Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
And Sonic the comic used to have some Guinness World Records. I think it still has some, but one record I think was longest video game comic or something. But at one point, I think they had a record for like longest. I'd have to double check this, but I thought they had a record for longest uninterrupted numbered run. And that was like, I think, according to like all Western kind of stories, because
I believe they still hold it for any video game comic.
Sure, yeah, but Marvel and DC, even though they have like Action Comics has gone for like 1,000 issues, there would be moments where they'd interrupt the numbering, right. And Sonic had like a consistent. Sonic had even when Sonic rebooted, they kept the numbering the same. So Sonic literally has a single numbering for like its Archie for like its entire run. Yeah. And so when people got invested, they were rewarded for that investment by having that numbering and that kind of line of continuity in a sense be very consistent. So like I said, when you talk to fans of this comic, they tend to be really diehard fans of it. So like I said, I think what ultimately the Sonic comic represents a height that a lot of even on this panel, that a lot of video game comics don't reach. But at the same time, in some ways, it's like the least video gamey of any of the comics I think we read all night.
It's really not a video game comic, right? It started from a property, but it hasn't been a video game comic in years, even by this point.
Yeah. So, well, now what's interesting is that eventually it does end up becoming a video game comic again when Sega steps in and says, "You will do Sonic Unleashed. You will do."
Right.
It basically it retransforms back into a video game comic at that point. And I think readers actually didn't like that so much. So it's kind of interesting to see how that, I guess, metamorphosis and those things changed over time.
So, interesting you brought that up. Of course, so meanwhile, tells his parents, you go take care of things. I'll keep Sonic busy. Now, when I'm reading like a superhero comic or something, I don't know if anyone ever feels the same way, but so often the action can feel like the least interesting part of the comic. It
often feels rushed. I will say it often feels rushed. Yeah.
These two know how to create beautifully choreographed and of course beautifully drawn scenes that actually make me want to pay attention to this stuff. The dialogue is always perfectly written in there. Every moment, the angles that they are able to draw, the way they can plot out this, the details. I love how Tails is actually using his tails to fight here as he slaps Sonic against the wall. I love the imagery of Sonic pressed up against this, and being goes and makes a stupid joke, and he's like, "Shut up, man!" And it totally looks like he's pressed up against this and annoyed.
Well, I hate to cut you. I don't want to cut any of this short, but we are actually over
We're
time.
almost done.
Okay.
But there's a couple points I got to get to though.
All right.
Because meanwhile, they break into the palace.
Yeah, our B plot, which is actually still pretty pathos ridden,
and we have our showdown. Right, as Tails' father and Elias have to show down.
Well, it's an ideological showdown. We have basically a guy who has seen a better way of running a government, essentially a more democratic way, versus the old monarchy that doesn't want to relinquish its power or its traditions.
And so you have these two sides.
And it's also great because a guy is there at a political protest and is accused of being at a riot.
Yeah, right.
It's not actually a riot.
That's right.
It's very topical. Very topical. Yeah. Thank you, Rhys, for bringing.
But while we have these two fights going on simultaneously, right?
I think when swords come out, maybe it undoes that. But
it's no longer a mostly peaceful protest.
But I like how they're happening at the same time. You've each got one of them. They each represent the two different sides going on here, right? And so, long story short, we have to go through all this beautiful fight scene choreography.
Too late.
Sonic and Tails do make up, which is good.
They do. And it turns out that there's a whole lot more below the surface here. And Sonic comes to realize, crap, I really have been a jerk to this poor kid. And so, he says, all right, fine, pound me. Right? And of course, Tails can't do it because there's a reason he's his hero. So I love this. These two are still fighting it out.
Princess Sally saves the day.
Yeah, she steps in, and then
through diplomacy. Yeah.
And so Sonic and Tails are like, "Oh crap, this is going down. We got to go stop it." And they get in there, and they've already fixed it, right? And what do they come up with? We've made a compromise. We've figured out a new system. We'll keep the monarchies, but technically, we're going to open up a system where you can create a council of the citizens. We can vote on it.
There's a surprising amount of maturity in the Sonic comic series, which is another thing that people really were drawn to. There's relationship drama, there's political drama, there's life and death drama, and it's all with talking animals. And that mixture with some fantasy and sci-fi dashed in, was a recipe for success for this very long running and beloved series.
So here's the deal, and I've saved this till the end. But here's how I see this. Eggman, back when he is teleporting these characters into his egg pods, Eggman is Ken Penders, yanking all these characters away from Knothole, one by one, pulling them away from the Sonic comics, keeping them locked up in his little world where he can do whatever he likes with them. And the only 4 that remain are the 4 original non-Penders characters. So, right from the originals from the game: Sonic, Tails, Amy, Knuckles, right? We get this new Mobotropolis, and when Eggman attacks, who is there to fight him off? Who is there to save the day?
Okay, there's a collection of Archie characters, and video game characters.
But they're all except for Julie Sue here, Penders characters, right? They're all either Archie or Sega characters. All the classic ones you've grown to know and love, especially throughout the Sonic Archie character. We've got characters like Vector in there. These are the characters who are going to make this work despite Eggman's best efforts to tear this world apart.
Why were they able to keep Julie there, or whatever purple hair hedgehog?
Well, again, I'm holding on to that for a second. And so then we go into this world where we literally have this story has a fight happening between 2 different sides. The old company and someone who wants to try something a little new. In other words, Sega and Archie, right? The people who want it strictly their way, and the people who want to actually tell good stories with good characters that people love. And when it all comes down to it, we end up with this compromise where we're going to figure out how to do a little bit of both. And we're going to end up with this new era.
It's a metaphor
of Sonic comics, this new era of Sonic history, that will hopefully be the better of both worlds. And then, of course, it all fell apart 2 years later. But here's the gosh darn thing, to answer your question about Julie Sue. It never happened. Sega produced, I had to find this out the hard way afterward. Sega produced Sonic Chronicles Dark Brotherhood September of 2008. When did
this comic come out?
Ian's first comic happened in March of 2006. The lawsuit didn't even start till 2009. None of this actually means what I just said it means. Somehow, Ian looked into the future and pulled real life out of it and fit it into his comic.
Or
Simpsons moment.
He made a very philosophical situation that could be applied to many different situations throughout history, including one that was about to happen.
That, or I'm just way over reading this.
He Nostradamus. All right. I have a... So when you presented this comic, I kind of knew of this through memes. And the meme about it is this is the Sonic made Tails a cuckold comic. So I was expecting to hate it, but... Flynn, to his credit, I have a love-or-hate-it relationship with Archie comics. So I think Flynn understands the characters. He understands that they need to have weaknesses, and he understands that they need to grow. So this is a growth issue for Tails. After this, he's not a little sidekick. He has stood up to his hero, and he can be more of a peer to his hero rather than just a little kid chasing after his hero.
Which is what happened in the games super long before this.
Right, but then again, you get into the modern games, it feels like Sega keeps resetting the if you keep resetting the timeline, Tails keeps getting reset back to a little kid who's a cow.
Well, and like I said, all these characters have been written by a guy who just went straight to the Wikipedia page, so no wonder they all became caricatures of themselves. Ian Flynn actually understands these characters, and he knows how to write a story with them.
I want to say one more thing about everybody loves to bash on Ken Penders, but there's something specific about Ken Penders I think screwed things up. So my understanding is Ken Penders thought that Sonic shouldn't marry Sally, that basically Sonic should be a free spirit and not have a girlfriend. Cartoonicus, does that sound right?
I mean, Sega has always kind of felt that way.
That's the Sega mandate. They never let Amy get anywhere with him because of that.
All right.
So at this point, especially in the new comics, Ian has it even harder because both he and Yardley got pulled over to IDW. But now Sega is like saying, Sonic is not allowed to have feelings. He's not allowed to cry. Like, he has to be this perfect character all the time. I cannot imagine what it is like for Ian to try to have to write into these circumstances. But once again, he's doing it, and he is cleaning up Sega's mess. The same way he cleaned up this mess the first time.
You can complain about him, but I don't even think Penders is that bad when you consider that the people who've treated Sonic worst out of anyone is Sonic Team.
Oh, you're absolutely right.
I was going to say
Sega has destroyed their own.
In a lot of games, Sonic's portrayal, because they won't let him be more human in some cases, he comes off as a psychopath. Because he's like, hey, I killed your boyfriend. I'll wish for a bunch of handkerchiefs to cry about it. That's how Sonic and the Secret Rings ends. So it's weird when your mandate goes too far, that it basically cripples a character and actually makes them way worse than if you would let them be open to more experimentation, I guess.
And back during Penders' era, he didn't have that restriction. It was only after these lawsuits that Sega freaked out and started coming down on everybody.
So it is technically his fault still, but
yeah.
I want to say something I like about Archie Sonic since I've kind of bagged on it. So I guess technically this is all of the cartoons supposed to be canon in the Archie Sonic universe, right? All the characters we know from the Saturday morning cartoon are there. They seem to reference events like Robotnik's taking over Robotropolis, and it's basically just all the crazy stuff that's has built up from that starting point. So I guess my problem is the cartoon ends with Sonic and Sally together, and that's clearly like the end of an arc. The young, naive hero has matured. He's won the heart of this incredibly, a capable young princess with no superpowers. Her only superpower is being intelligent and being and ruling by example. Right? She's she's an incredibly well written female character. Right? That's why she's fur-pilled so many people. But
gosh,
when you then just take that away and say, oh, they're single again, they broke up. To me, it feels like the Sonic comics are imitating something out of Marvel and DC comics and the complexity, but they're also imitating some of the things I don't like out of Marvel and DC, which is this incessant need for the hero to be reset back to teenage childhood. So Spider-Man gets married, they erase the marriage. Superman raises a family. Bendis blasts the family off into space. Sonic looks like he's going to get together with Sally. No, he's single again. And basically, like, as an amazing job as Ian Flynn did with this issue, the setup for it was basically Sonic going on a date with Fiona the Robot Fox, which wouldn't have happened if he was married to Sally with babies at this point, right? I want to see character growth for Sonic.
That of course has always been one of my problems with any comic that just never ends and continues going on throughout history, is that it's really hard to go anywhere when you don't have a direction that you're going.
And I think there's also some issues where because Amy is not a part of the original comics canon. She gets added later. And once Amy
they aged her up, there was some kind of like magic. She was supposed to be like 12 years old or something, and she wished to be older, which is how they explained the design change.
So like, but once Amy comes in, she's supposed to be kind of like the Sonic quasi-romantic interest anyway. So that throws a huge complication into, oh, we're going to have her married to Princess Sally idea. So there's some interesting, like I said, there's a weird mix of the Sonic, I think, comic some of it can be explained to a mixture of creator meddling in case of Penders at times. Although, like I said, he did contribute some very interesting and cool things. And then Sega's meddling itself. So you have corporate meddling and then creator meddling at times. I
was going to say, Sega did actually start meddling just lightly when the Sonic Adventure games came out, and that's when you started seeing all the game characters added to the Archie universe.
And Shadow was referenced in this comic. Yeah, I think Sonic accused Tails of being angsty like Shadow. Yeah.
Which again, Ian Flynn at least does a masterful job of managing to work with him in that. But it did happen even before him.
Hero says Amy didn't show up until issue 25, and she didn't really become a big deal until Adventure. That makes sense.
Amy was a big deal in the British comic, which again we can talk about if we ever have a Sonic night. But she was actually very popular over there, and I think I have a theory that we'll have to look into. I think Ian Flynn was a big fan of that comic, and he brought a lot of that influence with him.
Well, we'll have to save that for a longer Sonic conversation. So I think we're definitely way over our time, but thank you to our chat for participating. This has been an awesome conversation, and I think we've had a very good variety of video game comics today. We hit some definite ones you have to hit. Captain N, Sonic, you really can't have a video game comic conversation without talking about those. But I think we also brought some other interest. Carmen Sandiego was definitely one out of left field for me. So hoping you guys enjoyed all of those. The Super Mario comic was great as well. I had one of my closest friends had the print of her, I think, collection of that Super Mario comic. So I'd read that years and years and years ago.
And oddly, we didn't bring up Pokemon Adventures.
That was my honorable mention. If I had thought for 2 more seconds, Pokemon Adventures would have been the one I would have said. So Pokemon Adventures, the Zelda manga, and Super Mario Adventures are all tied for first place.
I was going to say, we could do, once you open the door to manga, there's a lot of books.
Okay, someone please help me find the manga adaptation of the live-action Mario Brothers movie with Bob Hoskins' manga Mario. I need to read it. Wow. I just know it exists, but where is it?
All right, time to shill.
Yeah, definitely time to chill for a second before we wrap things up.
I'll start since it's on point. I have a Spreadshirt shop where I deal with lots of cartoon anthropomorphic animals for those who are interested.
Bada bing.
So I'm going to put that in here.
Yeah. Link that in chat. And Captain N, what are you up to?
I've kind of been on hiatus, but I'm trying. Hopefully, very soon, I'll get some pages of X Dynamis Chaos back up, and you can always find that at xdynamischaos.com. I remember earlier this summer, I actually finally finished a short that's been sitting there, so that's been around. But if you've never read X Dynamis Chaos, there's plenty of backlog to read.
There you go.
Between the main story and shorts.
Maximum recommend. Go check it out. Not just look, I hate Captain N, and even I say you should go read X Dynamis Chaos.
It was a good comic.
Yeah, pop those links in chat. And Marm, you're still plugging away at Jane Wannabe Gladiator. Yep.
Jane Smith Wannabe Gladiator. You can read the pages so far on Webtoons. It's intended to be a physical comic, not a webtoon, but I jangle it and find a way to make it work on Webtoons anyway. 103 pages are complete and free to read, and progress art videos on my channel.
Alrighty. Rhys, do you want to show your own thing, or do I have to do it?
Yeah. I'm just. We ran long, so I've got some stuff I'm trying to take care of in the background.
Gotcha.
But hey, so guys, check it out. First of all, you can check out my webcomic, forceofgoodandevil.net. We've got more than 700 pages. The first year of these kids it's actually their third year in high school. The junior year is complete. And I have a little announcement, first time ever, and I'm going to go ahead and share a little thing here. I am working with Mrs. H on a couple of projects, and one of which is that she is coming on to illustrate the next Forces story. We're kind of doing it as a conjunction thing.
Good deal.
And where the heck is the thing?
I
I'm
love
picking
that
the
you
wrong
put the
thing.
pickle as your avatar. There we go.
Yeah, the color pickle was really awesome.
I do have
thank you, Mrs. H, for that.
I do have the thing up there, but drat! I picked the wrong option. I thought I had it ready to go, but I was wrong.
We'll have to check out forcesofgoodandevil.net.
Yeah, forcesofgoodandevil.net. That's the thing on there, and it is. And we're also we're going to be adapting that onto Webtoon as well. I know on Webtoon we just have the first volume completed on there because of the, I think it's 5 volumes that make up the first year. But that we're going to be launching a second title as a senior year, so we can go ahead and have those out there for folks. That won't be the final thing. It'll be a little bit of a work in progress on there. But any case, hang on just a second.
Speaking of high school, check out superschooled.com, a webcomic that Cartoonicus and I do. And we're trucking our characters through college right now, actually. Nice.
You ever wanted to see what a bunch of rowdy superhumans are like in college? Well, what's wrong with you? But
you can check out our latest story on that. And obviously, I've got more Adventures of Omega Girl coming. I've actually sent issue 2 to a couple people to get an advanced preview of it. Trucking along with issue 3 and issue 4 already. I'm just hoping to actually figure out some distribution publishing things. But once that's done, be happy to get that in your hands. So.
There we go. That's better. That's the first image from the story called Homecoming / Girls Night Out. So
artwork
that's going to be coming on there. Yes. So I'm a pretty stoked.
That comes from our pickle patron.
Yes.
Oh, cool.
So
I expect to see some Easter eggs in there.
Probably, but not a lot.
And I did art for you recently too.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, that is going to be, actually I can pop that up here if you want. That's going to be the cover of we're doing a manga edition of our first year of stories. It's called Manga Size Force of Good and Evil, and that's in a different window though. I don't have that ready to go. I'm
all right.
Not clear on that, but yeah, that'll be. I'm hoping to get a preview of all of that story ready to go pretty soon. But
awesome. All right, so for next week, what's up on the docket? Is that our newts?
Next week, we are heading to we're gonna be doing, it's a Comics Creators Club.
Okay,
we're having Sporkman and the Canadian Shield.
Okay.
Canadian Shield, we're doing a Comics Creators Club on that one. And the week after will be the Doug to Naples Appreciation Society meeting, where we'll be reading the 3 volumes of Newts.
All right, I'm gonna have to do some more homework.
Yep.
But
that one's gonna be a theologically dense one.
I might not have to do homework. I might have already read all of those.
But definitely come for the Comics Creators Club. We're going to do the voice. We have an amazing time for that. We do voice acting, the works. We have a whole system set up, which has gotten really fun. Play us on out there.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and drop in because the other thing I'm going to go ahead and say is we also have, you go check out idealcomics.gumroad.com. You could check out, we've got a web store where we can get digital comics, Zing 1 and 2.
Good reads.
Get Z-Bites, the zombie comedy that we've got there. We've got Joe Jobs, The Past Never Dies. That's available there. And a chiptune album inspired by our story, Game Boy Spring Break, into the wild blue internet. So, and I am going to play a little video on that once I find it again, because I can't talk and look things up. Apparently, that's somehow
we can make that an outro. That'll be a good outro.
Yep, that's the plan. That's the outro.
Yeah, okay. Well, then bye, everybody.
Just gotta click it on here and do that. And good night, everybody.
Stay tuned.
Nice.
What? Is this the closing credits?
Dear internet user, my name is Gameboy, and I prune computers. I'm a hero student at the Jack Cole Institute of Superheroics. Captain N is jamming out.